listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GBNews, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Monday, the 14th of October. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Britain open for business? The PM is pledging to get rid of regulations that are holding back investment in Britain. But will he really?
Will he really? And proud to be British. A new report reveals the vast majority of people believe children should be taught to be proud of British history in school. Should they be?
More historic reparations. A group of 15 Caribbean nations will ask the King and Sir Keir Starmer to pay £200 billion in slavery reparations. The Foreign Secretary's spoken about this in support for those payments in the past. Will the government now cave in?
And is Britain ready for more floods? The Met Office and the Environment Agency say we haven't learnt our lesson and we aren't prepared for more floods. Despite recent torrential weather, what is going wrong?
It's a busy show today with many different guests and big interviews, not least the Education Secretary coming up a little bit later in the programme. But I'm interested in your views on this big investment summit. This is supposed to be the time when the government changes the narrative. It's been doom and gloom for the last 100 days. We've been told that things can only get worse before they get better. Well, is this the point at which the government starts actually talking up Britain?
Well, it would be nice, wouldn't it? But what we've heard is that there's going to be tough love when it comes to our finances. What exactly does that mean? I'm assuming that means lots of taxes. More taxes. More taxes on business, even. So how can you go for big investment in this country before the budget where you're going to reveal lots of tax rises?
It's funny,
It's all a bit confusing for investors, don't you think?
Seeing all of these politicians getting on stages with some of the biggest business people in the world. The funniest one was the first interview on stage. Keir Starmer's just done his big speech about how great it is to invest in Britain. He goes up there with Eric Schmidt. Now, Eric Schmidt used to be the CEO of Google. Big guy in tech. The first thing he says is, I was shocked when Labour said it was in favour of growth.
And Keir Starmer says something, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, he sort of has these
Of
proselytations.
course we are.
We're gonna bring you that clip after your news headlines. But your
Where's
thoughts?
Elon Musk? Where's Elon Musk? Should he be there? Did he get snubbed? You know, he was at a summit with Rishi Sunak last year, wasn't he?
Well,
So
he's too busy, you know, flying successful rockets and catching the boosters. More on that, of course, later in the programme. But, of course, get in touch. gbnews.com/your say is the way to get involved. Let's get your headlines for now.
Tom, Emily, thank you very much. The top stories. The Prime Minister says it's time to upgrade the regulatory regime as he pledged to rip up bureaucracy. Speaking at the International Investment Summit today, Sir Keir Starmer said the government will make sure that every regulator in the country takes growth as seriously as businesses. The government has today unveiled investment deals worth billions of pounds in AI, life sciences and infrastructure. It comes as a row over criticism of P&O Ferries that reportedly jeopardised a £1 billion investment by its owner DP World has been smoothed over. The government aims to show it's making progress on its mission to deliver economic growth after marking 100 days in office. Sir Keir Starmer says he'll do everything in his power to galvanise economic growth.
In times like this, economic growth is vital, as it's always been, if we're to steer our way through a great period of insecurity and change and on to calmer waters. Because when working people benefit from that growth, when every community enjoys the fruits of wealth creation, it stops a country turning in on itself and against the world. And that, in turn, helps provide a stable foundation, breathing space, for a country to take advantage of those opportunities for a better future.
4 teenage IDF soldiers have been killed and more than 60 wounded in a drone strike on an army base in northern Israel. It's the deadliest attack on an Israeli base since Israel stepped up attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon last month. Lebanese terror group Hezbollah have claimed responsibility for the attack. This comes as the UN peacekeeping mission says Israeli tanks have forcibly entered its base in southern Lebanon. The health ministry there says 51 people were killed by Israeli strikes across the country yesterday. In Gaza, Hamas-run authorities say an Israeli attack on a school used as a shelter killed 22 people yesterday, including reportedly 15 children. The inquiry into how a British woman was fatally poisoned after being exposed to the Russian nerve agent Novichok has opened today. 44-year-old mother of 3 Dawn Sturgis was pronounced dead at Salisbury District Hospital in July 2018. She collapsed at her partner Charlie Rowley's home on June the 30th of 2018 after coming into contact with a perfume bottle containing the substance. It followed the attempted murder of former spy Sergei Skripal, his daughter Yulia, and then police officer Nick Bailey, who were poisoned in Salisbury in March of that year. The trial of 3 members of the same family over the murder of 10-year-old Sarah Sharif is due to start today. The child's father, Irfan Sharif, stepmother Bainash Batul and uncle Faisal Malik are all accused of killing her. Sarah's body was discovered at her home in Woking in Surrey on the 10th of August last year. The defendants have pleaded not guilty to her murder and to causing or allowing the death of a child. A potential third assassination attempt on former US President Donald Trump was reportedly thwarted on Saturday night. Local police arrested an armed man carrying multiple weapons and fake passports as he attempted to get into a Trump rally in California. The 49-year-old Las Vegas resident, Vem Miller, denied wanting to hurt the former president after being released on bail. This comes as the local county sheriff said the man in question was likely to be a sovereign citizen, someone who does not believe in government control. And the snowman is being depicted on a new Royal Mint 50p coin with a gold version hidden in one of its advent calendars for someone to discover on Christmas Eve. The Mint said that to further celebrate the launch of the Snowman 2024 collectible 50p coin, it's hidden a solid gold coin behind door number 24 in one limited edition advent calendar offering someone the chance of striking gold. Well, the advent calendars will be priced at £30. With a total of 3,000 available, only one will have a gold-proof coin of the snowman hidden inside. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
OK, good afternoon, Britain. It is now 12:07. It's a great time to back Britain. Those are the words of the Prime Minister as he made his case for investment in the UK at his first International Investment Summit held today.
Well, Sir Keir Starmer pledged to get rid of regulation that needlessly holds back investment as part of his plan for economic growth.
OK, well, this comes as Tech Secretary Peter Kyle says he's absolutely ready to engage with Elon Musk despite his very notable absence from today's summit.
Well, GB News' political correspondent Catherine Forster joins us now. And, Catherine, first of all, on the question of Musk, I remember distinctly him roaming around Bletchley Park with Rishi Sunak by his side last year. Not turning up for this government, though.
Indeed. Good afternoon, Tom and Emily. Yes, it seems like a very long time, but in fact, it was just last November where Elon Musk was the star of Bletchley Park and Rishi Sunak's AI summit. He's nowhere to be seen at this investment infrastructure summit, however. But I think it is worth saying, first of all, that this is not about AI specifically. Now, we know that he wasn't invited. The government have basically said, well, lots of people were invited. We can't have everybody who would like to go. They've subsequently doubled down on that and said that Elon Musk tends not to go to things like this. They're keen to make it that it wasn't his cup of tea rather than that he was sort of excluded. But we know there is a bit of bad blood, don't we? Because, of course, he was very outspoken about the release of prisoners and, you know, with the riots as well, people potentially being put in jail over comments made on social media. So I think it's safe to say there's not a lot of love lost there.
Yes, I don't think he's had anything positive to say about this new Labour government at all. At one point, it was almost as if Elon Musk was the official opposition to the current government. He does tweet away at Keir Starmer non-stop. I mean, when he's not doing other things like launching rockets into space, of course. But interesting to hear from the Prime Minister on tough choices, tough love, I think he said, when it comes to the public finances. We are still awaiting that budget on October the 30th. It's hard to say come and back Britain when we don't know what the tax and regulatory regime is going to look like yet.
Yes, indeed. It's a really difficult balancing act, isn't it? Because we've had 100 days with a lot of sort of doom and gloom messages. Things are really bad. Things are much worse than we thought. There's going to be painful decisions coming down the line. And at the same time now, they're sort of trying to turn outwards to the world and saying Britain is a brilliant place, never been more optimistic about our future. Bring your money to Britain. And of course, we need growth, don't we? It's something that Liz Truss talked a lot about, and she didn't go about it in the right way, clearly. But she was right, because our economy has pretty much stagnated since the financial crisis. We haven't had much growth. That's largely why we're not feeling very well off at all, and they desperately need to get that. So Sir Keir Starmer talking about stability, one of the things, saying, look, the chaos has gone. They know they've got this government in for at least 4.5 years, saying, we are here, we're determined to do things for the long term, you can trust us. I thought it was interesting too, apart from talking about regulation and saying that they're going to cut red tape that, quote, needlessly holds back investment, he also said that often we're more comfortable hiring people to work in low-paid, insecure contracts rather than investing in the new technology that delivers for workers, for productivity for our country. And that was one of the criticisms, wasn't it, with freedom of movement while we were in the EU, that it allowed businesses not to invest in technology, not to put their money into that, but basically just get cheap labour in. So there's lots of announcements coming out now of money being invested. We're hearing about money for Stansted Airport. They'll be dripping out throughout the day. The government hoping to turn the page on all the doom and gloom, present an optimistic picture. But sure, the budget is coming and there is going to be pain for sure.
Would have thought that it would have been good to have Elon Musk there, given that he's just announced a new series of robots for the household. I mean, they could pick all the fruit in the countryside. But anyway, one person who was there was the former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt. And we've got a little clip here of the first thing he said. This was the first big interview up on stage with the Prime Minister. What was the first thing that the former CEO of Google said?
I was shocked when Labour became strongly in favour of growth.
Wealth creation is the #1 mission of a Labour government.
Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awkward, isn't it? That's awkward.
I don't think that was the line that the Prime Minister would have been hoping to hear, would it, at all? But of course, they have said they want to get the fastest growth in the G7, and that's pretty difficult. If growth was easy, of course, we'd have already done it. But let's see what happens. And of course, you can't control what other G7 countries are doing. But big ambitions, a lot of rhetoric today. There's going to be a reception with the King in St. Paul's later. So no expense spared, being meeting and greeting, wining and dining these big global bosses, hoping that they will bring their money to Britain.
Well, Catherine Thorster, thank you so much for setting out the portrait of today's political landscape. Thanks for joining us.
I do like it when business people just communicate with politicians and they just, blurt out what they actually think. Very entertaining.
It really reminds you that actually politicians don't speak like normal human beings, because you can always predict what a politician will say because they've had to practice it 50,000 times.
Wealth creation is our #1 priority.
And then when you get some business leader, or even better, a former business leader, then you get real unfettered opinion.
Yeah, you do. And he's surprised that Labour are going for growth. So there you go, lots to prove. We're now joined by the former Labour spokesman and political commentator, James Matthewson. James, thank you very much indeed. It's quite tricky for the government to talk about how brilliant Britain is for investment and how fantastic opportunity it is for business to come over here and invest in our brilliant economy when they've spent the last however many months, weeks, talking down on our economy, saying how difficult it is, saying how things are going to get worse before they eventually get better. And again, we're waiting so long for this budget, aren't we? Difficult.
Yeah, I think part of the reason why we feel like we're waiting so long for this budget was because that Rose Garden speech, the one where we talked about pain and doom and gloom, and Keir Starmer stood there and said there's going to be tough decisions to be made and all the rest, and everyone went, all right, okay, let's brace for this. And then, of course, that was done at such an early stage that everyone has now been prepped and waiting for the budget for so long. So I think from a comms perspective, from an ops perspective, that just wasn't a great idea in hindsight. However, when it comes to the business kind of environment and atmosphere in Britain, the likes of Rachel Reeves, she's always been very close with business. She has a close relationship with business. Jonathan Reynolds as well has forged that relationship very strongly in recent years for the Labour Party. There's been conversations happening behind the scenes for many years about reassurance of the Labour Party. Now, the Labour Party, by its very name, right, by virtue of its name and by virtue of its core principles and why it was established, is meant to be the party to represent workers. So never forget that they're going to be putting workers first. That is the priority of the Labour Party, why it comes into government. It should stand up for working people. However,
so does it give you alarm bells? Are your alarm bells going off when you hear talk of cutting red tape and that sort of thing?
Yeah, the thing is, it makes a lot of people like me uncomfortable, right? Because it's the language you hear from pro-business parties like the Tories, right? It's not why I got into politics. However, in a democratic system where you represent everybody, and also when you are trying to stimulate growth and have a strong economy, of course you need to make sounds that are positive to the business sector. It's their language that you're speaking. So I don't think it's anything to be concerned about. That's why we saw the employee rights bill come out just before this, so that there would be almost this reassurance, this calming of the Labour side of, this is what we're doing. We're on the side of workers' rights. However, we're also going to try and encourage businesses in. But, businesses don't like that, because ultimately businesses' goal is profit. It's not about people. No matter how many business leaders tell you that, they care about people, ultimately their goal and their aim is profit.
It's a good thing profit's good for most of us then if we work for a business, isn't it?
Not always,
Profit's quite a good thing, James.
It's a good thing generally, but it's not always a good thing. Depends whose profit it is.
Goodness me. I do want to bring it back to this context in which we're sitting in, because we have been in a state of suspended animation for the last 3 months, waiting for this budget. We don't know what the tax regime is going to look like. We've got vague hints of what the regulatory regime is going to look like. There's been some analysis that suggests one of the reasons why this has been a very stuttering start to a new government is so many departments hinge their decisions upon what is going to be available in the budget. So you haven't been able to have the normal communications grid. You haven't been able to have the normal announcements we'd expect from government departments. They've been sat there twiddling their thumbs, infighting, moving each other's desks around and firing a chief of staff, simply because we've been waiting and waiting and waiting for this budget. Do you think it was a mistake to have this big delay, sort of gumming everything up?
Yeah, I think less of a delay and more of a, talking about it too early. I think the grid in general, that first 100 days of what we're going to talk about, when we're going to talk about it, has been an absolute disaster, if we're being honest. We've got to be open and honest about that. It has been mismanaged. Now, all of that is being pinned to poor Sue Gray. I don't know. We don't know. None of us know if Sue Gray was entirely responsible for all of that. But, because she's resigned, because she's gone, it's all her fault now, and it will be. So, Morgan McSweeney has won this battle for Downing Street. So at least there will be a streamlined and unopposed way of managing that grid. So hopefully the messaging will improve. But I think calling out the budget and talking about it so early on, when I've had friends, and we've all had friends and family, those of us in politics, reach out and say, when's this budget happening? When do we hear how bad it's going to be, because everyone's poised for it. So I think you're absolutely right. It was too early and it was mishandled.
James Mathewson, thank you very much indeed, former Labour advisor and political commentator. Thank you very much. I mean, just looking at the headlines today, so Keir Starmer facing calls to sack his Transport Secretary after she nearly sank £1 billion of investment. You've got increasing national insurance contributions would be a handbrake on investment, warns city leaders. You've got hiring falls to its lowest levels since the pandemic, because this budget is being so delayed and there are so many fears over a potential tax raid from Rachel Reeves. It's all getting a bit tricky.
On the eve of this summit, 700 business leaders signed a letter from the Entrepreneurs Network saying that they should not, because there's been all these rumours about capital gains tax almost doubling to 39%. That would be the second highest rate in Europe, more than twice the European average for this tax rate that is obviously so crucial. You need a competitive rate of capital gains tax if you want people to invest in your country. Pretty extraordinary that 700 business leaders on the eve of this summit have said, this is a terrible idea, please don't do this. And we still don't get any answers from the government. It's the delay, it's the uncertainty from a government that's trying to make its watchword certainty and stability.
Yeah, it's not great, is it, the outlook currently? gbnews.com/your say is the way to get in touch. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Are you proud to be British? Do you believe school children should be taught in their classrooms to be proud of our history? Apparently, the majority of people do. Stay tuned.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
There's a huge financial and mental strain for parents, but we have this system now where it talks about they bringing a family member to help, but I don't think that's happening a lot of the time. I think people are having to be off work, look after their child, and often, sorry to say, but their school always calls the mum, and then you have this situation where you have nobody to look after your child. People's grandparents don't seem to want to do it so much, and often family members aren't just down the road. So what we have is no village. And I think it's really important when you have a child that you need that village.
Are children getting more sicker than they used to be? Or is it just that we take the odd sniffle a bit more seriously now since 2020?
Yes, I do think the odd sniffle can be. I know in my school they say 3 days away, the slightest little thing, and it's like...
If you have a cold?
Yeah, no, please, go in, yeah.
And 3 days off if you have a cold for a child, and we wonder why all these parents aren't at work. I think some of these figures about people who could be working and aren't working, they're not necessarily on benefits, but some of them will be people who, during the pandemic, particularly parents, decided to get a different work-life balance. They quite liked being at home, and they realised the children were benefiting from it. Do you think those people are in these statistics Annette.
Of people staying at home with not working.
Who decided to not go back to work of working age.
Yes, I think a lot of people don't want to go into an office anymore either. They've had that little bit of freedom and they're like, I'm not going in. And I know employers are trying to get them to go in, but they just want to be at home. They want to be near their children if their children are sick, whether that's the mum or the dad. And also a lot of people don't live near their office or wherever. They don't want to commute. Train fares have gone up, so they say, well, why should I pay? So you have this whole knock-on effect throughout the economy.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Conservative MPs have finally chosen their top 2 for the leadership. And now, it's over to the members. Join me, Christopher Hope, on Thursday as Kevin Badenoch and Robert Jenrick are quizzed by Conservative Party members and myself at our GB News leadership event.
And afterwards, join me, Patrick Christys, with a live studio audience and a star panel as we discuss what it means for the Conservative Party and what it means for you. Decision Time, the race to lead, from 7 p.m. this Thursday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Conservative MPs have finally chosen their top 2 for the leadership. And now, it's over to the members. Join me, Christopher Hope, on Thursday as Kevin Badenoch and Robert Jenrick are quizzed by Conservative Party members and myself at our GB News leadership event.
And afterwards, join me, Patrick Christys, with a live studio audience and a star panel as we discuss what it means for the Conservative Party and what it means for you. Decision Time, the race to lead, from 7 p.m. this Thursday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 24 minutes past 2. Now, ethnic minorities want their children to be proud of British history, a new survey has revealed.
Yes, the majority of everyone, of all colours, races, ethnicities, etc., want pride in Britain to be instilled in the classroom. 72% of the public support this. 60% of minority groups believe Britain has been a force for good, citing the Second World War, the Industrial Revolution and the abolition of the slave trade as events they're most proud of.
Which is interesting, because speaking to many people, you'd think that actually ethnic minority Brits weren't in favour of British history. But turns out they are, according to this survey, done by Policy Exchange, which says this data points away from the decolonising the curriculum narrative. So, should all schools in the UK encourage our kids to not be ashamed of the past?
OK, well, for more on this, we're now joined by writer and broadcaster Emma Webb. Emma, thank you very much indeed. Do you think schools at the moment are teaching children to be proud of British history, or is the reverse happening? What's going on, do you think?
No, I don't think they are. In fact, I think these results are extra remarkable for the fact that we're constantly being beaten around the head, particularly young people. I mean, there have been some polls that have shown that young people don't feel particularly proud to be British, or that imply that. But I think actually, as Tom sort of pointed to there, when you talk to a lot of people, particularly on, if you're reading the news, particularly the mainstream media, you would get the impression that this is not the case. And I think that is because you have people who are effectively self-appointed leaders of, quote, communities, who are really invested in pushing this highly ideological decolonisation movement. And what this actually suggests is that they are not representative of the majority of Britons, of all groups, of all communities, whether that is ethnic minority or otherwise. And I think it also suggests that fundamentally people want to feel at home. They want to feel proud of the place that either they were born in or that has become their adopted country. They want to love the place that they are trying to make their home. And actually all of this talk of integration and efforts towards integration being somehow oppressive because it's asking people to leave their cultures behind and become part of this country, that actually all of the negativity about that is mistaken. And actually that is not only what is good for Britain, but it's also what people in Britain want.
Isn't there a problem here with the concept of multiculturalism versus these sort of universal values that you're speaking about, or British values, I should say, in that I suppose you have to pick a lane, right? Either you have multiple different identities and belief structures existing in a sort of patchwork, or you have one identity, and it seems like we haven't quite decided.
Well, multiculturalism is an extraordinary experiment, and going all the way back to 2015, whether it was Angela Merkel or David Cameron, leaders almost a decade ago now were already saying that multiculturalism had failed, and yet still when Suella Braverman came out and said that multiculturalism had failed, everybody sort of blew their tops and thought that this was an insane thing for her to have suggested. But the reality is that multiculturalism doesn't work, because what you end up with is plural monoculturalisms that in many, many cases actually oppress those minorities within minorities, thinking, women who are subject to the rulings of Sharia courts as one example. Integration is a good thing. We should be proud of, not British values in the abstract, but who we are as a community, as a sort of national family. And I think that's what we're seeing in these results, is that people do, even if they're adopted into that family, they want to be proud of those things like Magna Carta. They want that to become part of
Emma, just one of the things that's cited is the abolition of the slave trade as something that people are proud of. Now, there's going to be a lot of talk about this because there's a meeting of Commonwealth countries, and I believe 14 Caribbean nations are calling on the King and the Prime Minister and David Lammy to hand over billions in reparations. Do you think that's something that this government could potentially cede?
Emily, you read my mind. It's something that they shouldn't cede, clearly. And I think that's one of the most interesting findings in this study, is that those who are of African descent or of Caribbean origin are actually quite positive about Britain's history in abolishing the slave trade. And these are points that very, very rarely get made because they're so overshadowed by unrelenting negativity. And when you have somebody like David Lammy as our Foreign Secretary ranting in Parliament about reparations, these people do not represent the majority of ethnic minority groups in this country, clearly. And, if unfortunately we don't have a Conservative government, or we don't have a non-Labour government, but you would hope that these statistics would be something that can be cited in the future, and hopefully more studies can be done to back this up. I think this is actually what people's daily experience is when they speak to people in their lives, and that clashes and contrasts horribly with what we're being told in the media.
I mean, these discussions get dominated, don't they, by activists and people who are extreme on the issues, when most people are pretty relaxed about that type of thing. But Emma Webb, thank you very much indeed, writer and broadcaster. We'll speak again. Thank you very much.
This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up today, including an interview with a cabinet minister after this.
Good afternoon. The top stories. The Prime Minister says he will do everything in his power to galvanise economic growth. Speaking at the International Investment Summit earlier today, Sir Keir Starmer said the government will make sure that every regulator in the country takes growth as seriously as businesses. The government has today unveiled investment deals worth billions of pounds in AI, life sciences and infrastructure. It comes as a row over criticism of P&O ferries that reportedly jeopardised a £1 billion investment by its owner DP World has been smoothed over. The government aims to show it's making progress on its mission to deliver economic growth after marking 100 days in office. 4 teenage IDF soldiers have been killed and more than 60 wounded in a drone strike on an army base in northern Israel. It's the deadliest attack on an Israeli base since Israel stepped up attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon last month. Lebanese terror group Hezbollah have claimed responsibility for the attack. This comes as the UN peacekeeping mission says Israeli tanks have forcibly entered its base in southern Lebanon. The health ministry there says 51 people were killed by Israeli strikes across the country yesterday. In Gaza, Hamas-run authorities say an Israeli attack on a school used as a shelter killed 22 people yesterday, including reportedly 15 children. And the perfume bottle carrying the Russian nerve agent that fatally poisoned a British woman contained enough poison to kill thousands of people, the inquiry into her death has been told today. 44-year-old mother of 3, Dawn Sturgis, was pronounced dead at Salisbury District Hospital in July 2018. The Novichok poisonings inquiry is going to look at whether she died after she was caught in the crossfire of an illegal and outrageous international assassination attempt. She collapsed at her partner Charlie Rowley's home on June 30th of 2018 after coming into contact with that perfume bottle containing the substance. It followed the attempted murder of former spy Sergei Skripal, his daughter Yulia, and then police officer Nick Bailey, who were poisoned in Salisbury of March that year. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. After a chilly weekend, it is getting warmer over the next few days. Still feels pretty cool with the dank conditions across much of the south today. It's quite a wet start across southern England thanks to this little weather system. That is now scooting away. There's another weather front across northern Scotland, providing some cloud and rain across the Northern Isles and Aberdeenshire, but that is also tending to clear. And much of southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern England, dry, fine and sunny. Not a lot of sunshine further south. The rain clearing, but staying a bit damp and drizzly here and there, and certainly staying fairly grey. Temperatures struggling up into the teens, maybe the high teens across the south later on, but further north, feeling quite pleasant with the sunshine and the lighter winds. There is still some of that rain just clearing away from Shetland and Orkney into this evening, however, but it will be turning drier here. Generally elsewhere across Scotland, it's going to be a fine evening with largely clear skies, and same goes for Northern Ireland and a good chunk of northern England. But head further south and it's staying fairly cloudy. There is some rain and drizzle here and there, so a little bit damp for the evening rush hour across parts of the M4 and the M25. Now, as we go through this evening and overnight, we're not going to see a great deal of change. Clear skies will allow it to turn a little chilly across parts of Scotland, at least for a time. Temperatures could dip down to freezing. But further south, we're actually going to see the thicker cloud and the drizzle just drifting north, so there may be a few spots over southern Scotland, certainly northern England. Temperatures in the south staying in double figures, but as I said, it's a pretty chilly night across northern Scotland where we've got the clear skies. But it does mean here some sunshine on Tuesday. Elsewhere, Tuesday is going to be a pretty glum affair, a much duller day for central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. Parts may brighten up through the day, particularly North Wales, and staying largely sunny across the far north of Scotland, thanks to southerly winds that are, despite the cloudy conditions, wafting up warmer air.
The latest GB News travel.
The M8 eastbound has long delays to an earlier accident on the exit slip road at junction 22 for the M77 interchange. Delays to before 25 as well as back to junction 3 on the M77, adding 30 minutes to your journey. The M606, 2 lanes are closed and slow traffic to emergency train repairs around junction 1 for Chain Bar on the roundabout. Northbound on the M3 though, all lanes have reopened on the exit slip road at junction 6 to Basingstoke. Traffic is clearing as emergency barrier repairs are now complete. Westbound on the M27, that's also cleared. All lanes reopened from junction 10 to 9. However, the eastbound side of the M4, that is slow to a lane closure and an accident from 19 for Bristol through to junction 18 for Bath. For now, that's your very latest travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 36 minutes past midday. Now, the Prime Minister has made his case for investment into the UK today when addressing business leaders at his first International Investment Summit in London.
Yes, he cited Britain's amazing education sector as one of the many reasons to invest in this country.
Yes, interesting, really. It was a switch in tone from the Prime Minister, because for months we've heard sort of the narrative that we must tighten our belts, that actually things were much worse than the government really thought when they arrived here. You know, the prisons are overflowing, there's no money, all these infrastructure projects have to be cancelled, all the rest of it.
Schools are falling down.
And he sounded like sort of the caricature of Philip Hammond back when he was Chancellor. He was called Eeyore in the press because he was so dour and down. Well, it seems that the Prime Minister has switched from being Eeyore and is now almost Boris Johnsonian in his boosterism. Listen to this. This is what he said. "Make no mistake, this is a great moment to back Britain. We have an amazing education system, the largest tech sector in Europe, AI, life sciences, clean energy, creative industries." I mean, it sounded like something from Boris Johnson.
Yes, perhaps without the references to the classics.
Or Peppa Pig.
To the Roman daughter Peppa Pig. Yes, but yes, lots of very good, positive-sounding noises are coming from this investment summit. I just wonder, as you say, how it fits with the narrative up till now from the new government, that everything is going to get worse before it gets better, how we're going to have to tighten our belts, how, you know, we're all predicting that there will be tax hikes coming down the line.
But
so how does it fit?
Is this the big reset? Is this a new tone from the government? Is it all going to be sunny positivity and things can only get better from here on out? Well, there's a new team in Downing Street, a new chief of staff. Perhaps that's changed the messaging somewhat. But of course, education was one of those key elements that the Prime Minister mentioned as a reason to invest in Britain, a success story for Britain. One of the reasons why these big American firms, these big international investors should come to the UK, because of our educated workforce in those particular industries that really matter, those growth industries.
OK, well, I believe we now have the Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, on the line from the summit. Thank you very much indeed, Bridget. Can we start with that sort of change of tone that we're hearing from the Prime Minister? All this talk of how fantastic this country is to invest in, including the education sector, including our brilliant schools and universities. Bridget Phillipson, you haven't always been so positive about our country's record on education.
Our country is a great place to come and do business, and today's investment summit is all about that, making clear that we're open to the world and we welcome new investment. And there's been, you know, a number of big announcements today demonstrating our commitment and business kind of in confidence in what we're delivering. Where it comes to education, the question that you ask, our universities, for example, are world leading both in terms of research, technology, and it's the reason that lots of people from around the world want to come and study here. And our schools, our teachers, our staff do an amazing job. There are still lots of big challenges. I'm under no illusions about that. And skills is one area where we need to do things differently as a country. I've heard that today from businesses that I've met with, and that's why we're setting up Skills England, to make sure that across government we're driving that work around skills, to create more apprenticeships and to make sure that we're working with businesses to deliver the skills and the well-paid jobs that we need.
Do you see the point about this shift in tone? It was only in September of this year when you, new in the job as Education Secretary, said things are getting worse in education. Look at the raw numbers, don't look at the rankings. We're down in reading, down in maths, down in science. And now you're saying that education is brilliant in this country, and that's one of the reasons people should come and invest in it.
Oh, it's undeniably true that we are going backwards where it comes to those PISA scores that you identify, and we've got to turn that around. We also see a growing gap. Yes, we're falling backwards. We're just falling backwards less quickly than some other countries. That's not a record to be proud of, I'm afraid, and I'm determined to turn that around. But alongside that, we see... Unfortunately, we're moving in the wrong direction before the pandemic as well. But absolutely, the pandemic has had a serious impact, and we've seen a growing gap where it comes to outcomes for young people from better off backgrounds and less well off backgrounds, and that's something that we do have to focus on. And I want to make sure that all young people get a great education and then at the age of 16 have a range of options as to their next path and the destination that they take. And we've got a big challenge around apprenticeships, and I want to make sure that we get more young people having the opportunity to take on an apprenticeship. That's what I've been talking to businesses here today about, but also how we invest in the adult workforce too, and the changes that we're setting out, converting the apprenticeship levy into a growth and skills levy, more flexibility for business and more of a focus on training right throughout workers' lives will be crucial where it comes to driving that mission of growth, getting more investment into our country, making sure that we remain an attractive place for businesses to come.
Secretary of State, do you still plan to bring in the VAT on private schools from this coming January?
Yes, we do, and that's because we want to make sure that we're investing in our state schools. We know they're under enormous pressure. They need more teachers. Our young people need more mental health support. That remains the priority in the position of this government.
But Bridget Phillipson, why are so many of the unions coming out, as well as tax experts and school leaders and parents, of course? Why are so many unions coming out to say that this is an unreasonable time frame? They're saying that the implementation of this policy should, if it has to come in, at least wait till the new term, the new school year in September, so people can actually plan. Why are you so adamant that it has to be this January?
Because we want to raise that money to invest in our state schools. We've just talked about the challenges that they face. It is a priority to make sure that we're delivering better life chances for our children in state schools. That's where the vast majority of children go to school. It's where the vast majority of your viewers will send their children to school, and they want a government that's focused on driving up standards and investing in state schools.
Absolutely, people do want a government that's focused on driving up standards. But Bridget, quite a few people were shocked by a recent tweet of yours that appeared to describe state school children as our children and private school children as, I guess, not our children. I believe we can take a little look. You say, our state schools need teachers more than private schools need embossed stationery. Our children need mental health support more than private schools need new pools. Our students need career advice more than private schools need AstroTurf pitches. I mean, a lot of people seeing this tweet, see it as a little bit spiteful, as if those children who go to private schools are somehow not relevant, not in need of any help from government, as if it just comes across a little spiteful, a little bit ideological, Bridget Phillipson.
So parents can choose where they educate their children. Some parents choose to send their children to private schools. That's absolutely their right and their choice. But I make no apology as Education Secretary for choosing to invest the money that we will raise in our state schools, because we know that has to be a priority. It's what voters across the country voted for on the 4th of July, and they want to make sure that our state schools are getting the support that they need. And as I say, the vast majority of your viewers will be more interested in what's going on within our state schools, because that's where the majority of children in our country receive their education. That's my priority.
Yeah, and I think they're terribly worried that lots of private school children are going to be, filling those spaces or trying to get places in their state schools that are overcrowded. But we'll move on.
Yes, we want to bring you to some other questions.
Well, I don't accept the evidence. The evidence doesn't support that.
Well, hang on. The report author of the IFS report into private schools and the potential pupil exodus has said that actually double the amount that he predicted could actually move into private schools. It could be as many as 90,000 pupils. We already know that 10,000 fewer have signed up for 10,000 fewer this year are heading for private schools, so they'll be in our state schools. I mean, this is what people are worried about, isn't it?
Well, we simultaneously have a falling birth rate and actually big gaps opening up in terms of the numbers of places that are available within our state schools. But I simply don't accept that kind of shift. And the Independent Institute for Fiscal Studies were very clear that they anticipated minimal impact of this policy, but they also agreed that it would raise money that could be invested elsewhere.
Today on the channel we've been discussing a new report out from Policy Exchange which recommends that children should be taught more pride in British history. Would you like to see such an impetus introduced to our state schools?
I think it's incredibly important that children understand our history, are able to look at that richness, that wealth of experience, and we've actually launched a curriculum and assessment review that will look at all of these issues, and I'd encourage anyone interested in the topic, including the organisation in question, to share that with the review so that we can take account of their views.
And just finally, we've seen a new opinion poll extrapolated across all seats in the country. It looks like your seat of Sunderland South is at risk to the Reform Party. This new poll from More in Common has you actually losing your seat to the Reform Party. Have you seen this poll, and what do you make of it?
No, I haven't, and I always judge polls with a degree of caution. I was always reluctant to comment on them in too much detail from opposition, and that holds true now because they represent a snapshot in time. What I'm focusing on for my constituents and for your viewers across the country is making sure that we're delivering a brilliant education system that prepares children for life, that we turn around the skills landscape in our country to make sure that workers have the chance to get on, and as we're setting out today, that we're demonstrating that Britain is a great place to come and do business, and voters at the next general election in 4 years' time, whenever it happens to be, 5 years' time, they can make a decision then on our record.
Well, Bridget Phillipson, Secretary of State for Education, thank you so much for joining us there from the edges of the Investment Summit in London.
The edges of the Investment Summit.
The periphery. With a lovely background. I mean, majestical buildings rising behind. What a lovely shot. Well done to the cinematographers.
OK, well, we've got lots more coming up on today's show, so do stay with us. We are going to be catching up on the horrendous weather outside and whether Britain is actually ready for more floods. That seems to be on the cards. Stay tuned.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
You know, is the fact that electric blanket sales going up actually a good thing? This means that people are switched on to the problems that the winter might hold, that they might have some defence against it, or is it a real indictment of a Labour government that they aren't going to be able to, you know, support elderly people in their hour of need?
Good morning, by the way.
Morning.
I think the sale of electric blankets may well be because we've had this cold snap because of the Arctic weather coming in from the north. However, I think it's an absolute reality that, as your clip said, that over 800,000 elderly people who are eligible for the winter fuel allowance, who can get pension credits, are struggling to apply. And so what is absolutely essential at the moment is that all of those older people who are eligible for pension credits do apply and do get what's owed to them. The benefits are owed to them. And the average that people will get through pension credits is about £78 a week. So that's definitely going to make a massive difference to people who are really struggling.
What can organisations like yours do to encourage people to, I guess, educate themselves on technology and make that first step into the digital world, which is very intimidating at times?
Absolutely, and that's what we do at Good Things Foundation. So we're a national charity. We work all across the whole of the UK. And in your clip there, you had Links Digital, and they're a member of what we call the National Digital Inclusion Network, which is a network of local charities, small local community organisations, food banks, job centres, old people's clubs. So anyone, any organisation at that local level.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and he did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right, welcome back. This is Good Afternoon Britain. It's now 12:51. Now, as the UK faces increasing wet weather, the Met Office and Environment Agency are urging the public to prepare for potential flooding during Flood Action Week, marking the anniversary of Storm Babette.
Yeah, it's nice that the officials are telling it's our problem for flooding, not their problem for not dredging properly or anything else. Officials highlight the risk of a rising frequency of extreme weather due to climate change and advise checking flood risks and signing up for warnings. Although a higher flood risk, winter isn't certain.
OK, well, let's find out more from GB News Yorkshire and Humber reporter Anna Riley. Anna, do tell us more. Are we woefully prepared?
Good afternoon to you both. Well, certainly last year, Storm Babette, we weren't prepared as well as we could be, you could say, with 7 deaths that were caused as a result of that storm. Some places in the UK saw 2 months worth of rainfall within a 3-day period, and it was certainly something that we covered on the channel last year. I was in South Yorkshire, in Catcliffe, in Rotherham, that was heavily impacted by the storm and by that heavy rain, which led to flooding. And this afternoon I'm here in Hull. I'm where the River Hull meets the Humber estuary, and I'm next to the £42 million flood defence barrier that's been put in place 2 years ago to try and protect this city. Hull is one of the UK's most low-lying cities, making it prone to flooding. Thousands of people had to evacuate their homes back in 2007 due to heavy rainfall. The drainage system just couldn't cope, and again in 2013 hundreds of people had to evacuate their homes and businesses. So this week it's Flood Action Week. It's been run by the Environment Agency, and they're telling people how to prepare for flooding. They say if you go on their website, you can check the long-term flood risk for the area that you live in, find out the possible causes of flooding in your area and how to manage that risk. They also say you can sign up for alerts online or via text or phone as well to have flood alerts sent to your area so you can prepare for that, and also to take steps to protect yourself from future flooding. That includes storing important documents in secure, waterproof location, also taking rugs and small furniture upstairs if the flooding is likely, and also checking how to turn off your electricity and water, and preparing a flood kit as well in case you have to evacuate your home at short notice. And all that and more information can be found on the Environment Agency's website.
Brilliant stuff. Anna Riley, thank you so much for joining us there by the River Hull.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. It looks a beautiful day up there.
It does.
It's not like that down here today, that's for sure.
And splendid flood defences. I'm sure that we're all fine. Although that's not the message that we should be putting out. We should be saying, be vigilant, prepare. It's probably going to be fine, though.
Well, hopefully, Tom. Hopefully it's fine.
They built a big flood defence.
Yeah, but not everywhere in the country, unfortunately.
True, yeah.
And those floods do keep coming. But we've got lots more coming up on today's show. We are going to return to all the promises for big investment in this country. Will that play out? That's after the weather.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. After a chilly weekend, it is getting warmer over the next few days. Still feels pretty cool with the dank conditions across much of the south today. It was quite a wet start across southern England thanks to this little weather system. That is now scooting away. There's another weather front across northern Scotland, providing some cloud and rain across the Northern Isles and Aberdeenshire, but that is also tending to clear. And much of southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern England, dry, fine and sunny. Not a lot of sunshine further south. The rain clearing, but staying a bit damp and drizzly here and there, and certainly staying fairly grey. Temperatures struggling up into the teens, maybe the high teens across the south later on, but further north feeling quite pleasant with the sunshine and the lighter winds. There is still some of that rain just clearing away from Shetland and Orkney into this evening, however, but it will be turning drier here. Generally elsewhere across Scotland it's going to be a fine evening with largely clear skies, and same goes for Northern Ireland and a good chunk of northern England. But head further south and it's staying fairly cloudy. There is some rain and drizzle here and there, so a little bit damp for the evening rush hour across parts of the M4 and the M25. Now, as we go through this evening and overnight, we're not going to see a great deal of change. Clear skies will allow it to turn a little chilly across parts of Scotland, at least for a time. Temperatures could dip down to freezing. But further south, we're actually going to see the thicker cloud and the drizzle just drifting north, so there may be a few spots over southern Scotland, certainly northern England. Temperatures in the south staying in double figures, but as I said, it's a pretty chilly night across northern Scotland where we've got the clear skies. But it does mean here some sunshine on Tuesday. Elsewhere, Tuesday is going to be a pretty glum affair, a much duller day for central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England. Parts may brighten up through the day, particularly North Wales, and staying largely sunny across the far north of Scotland, thanks to southerly winds that are, despite the cloudy conditions, wafting up warmer air.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's only luck. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Sleep Report 2024 is based on a comprehensive survey conducted all across the country, and the report found that over half the population, get this, falls short of the recommended 7+ hours of required sleep each night. And shockingly, 1 in 4 of us is getting 5 hours or less, and that includes you, doesn't it?
Yes, I'm very bad at sleep. 4 or 5, I'd say.
That's
A bit
awful.
like Maggie Thatcher. What would you get on average?
I'd say at least 6. 7 probably average.
That's probably not good. I think you probably need 8. Well, almost half of Brits rate their sleep quality as 5 out of 10 or lower.
Dr Manesh Shah and Dr Sita Shah joins us now to tell us all about the sleep and how Brits are struggling. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
First questions to you both. How many hours do you both get?
God, I think it varies. I try and hit that 7 hours of sleep.
Why are Brits so bad at getting sleep, especially in terms of hours? 4 or 5 hours for me, 6 hours for you. It's the same for everybody out there in the UK. We're just not going to bed early enough. Is it as simple as that? Or is it slightly more complicated?
Yeah, so I think the key is to establish a good routine. So waking up at the same time every day, making sure that you're going to sleep at the same time every day, and being quite sort of rigid and strict with yourself when it comes to those timings.
And also, it's not just the length of, I get, say, 7 hours, it's the quality, isn't it? You've got different phases of sleep.
Yeah.
Just explain those. Is it, as far as I remember, REM, deep sleep? Just tell us about that.
Correct, yeah. So, essentially, there's 4 stages to sleep. So there's stage 1 and stage 2, which are your lighter stages of sleep. And then stage 3 is your deeper sleep. And then you've got the stage 4, which is your REM. Which is a rapid eye movement stage. And it's the stage 3 and the REM sleep which is really, really important for restorative and regenerative sleep.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Monday, the 14th of October. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Well, Britain is open for business. The Prime Minister, he's pledging to get rid of regulations that are holding back investments in Britain. What exactly does he mean?
More historic reparations. A group of 15 Caribbean nations will ask the King and Sir Keir Starmer to pay £200 billion in slavery reparations. The Foreign Secretary has spoken very much in support of such payments in the past, but will the government now cave in?
And a new report has revealed that Chinese heritage pupils on free school meals are outperforming white British pupils from far better off backgrounds. Now, critics say it shows the traditional belief that life chances are determined by a binary has been overturned. OK, white.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. Much to come on today's programme, not least the government's vibe shift, we're calling this. They've been talking...
Attempted.
Attempted vibe shift. Reset. A reset for the government, just 100 days in. Keir Starmer's gone from a sort of Eeyore-like figure, saying that everything's really dreadful, much worse than he expected when he got elected. You know, there's going to have to be tax rises and we're going to have to release prisoners and all the rest of it. Well, now he's saying Britain is brilliant. And not only is it brilliant, it's booming.
Is it a bit late, though? I mean, we've all read the reports that millionaires are leaving in their droves, or at least thinking about it if they haven't left already. We're all reading how, national insurance contributions for employers may also be going up, when the government has said before, no, national insurance won't go up. OK. We're hearing from the, city bosses that they're worried and hiring's fallen to the lowest level since COVID. I mean, it's a lot to turn around, isn't it, if you want to get across a positive message?
Yeah, I mean, it's strange to think that, weeks and weeks, months and months of relentlessly talking down this country. Oh, that doesn't matter because the international investors, we're all going to get them together in this one summit today and say, ignore everything that we've said for the past 3 months. Today, we're going to tell you how great this country is, and then you'll give us all your money, won't you? I mean, it's a bait and switch.
Yeah, well, do you buy it? gbnews.com/your say. Do you think Britain is back? It's open doors for investment, all of that. Do you think it will come flooding in? I mean, the Transport Secretary almost got herself in rather a lot of trouble over potentially tanking a £1 billion investment from P&O ferries. So that's where we are. But let's get the headlines with Tatiana.
Emily, thank you very much. Good afternoon. The top stories. The Prime Minister says he will do everything in his power to galvanise economic growth. Speaking at the International Investment Summit today, Sir Keir Starmer said the government will make sure that every regulator in the country takes growth as seriously as businesses. The government has today unveiled investment deals worth billions of pounds in AI, life sciences and infrastructure. It comes as a row over criticism of P&O ferries that reportedly jeopardised a £1 billion investment by its owner DP World has been smoothed over. The government aims to show it's making progress on its mission to deliver economic growth after marking 100 days in office.
In times like this, economic growth is vital, as it's always been, if we're to steer our way through a great period of insecurity and change and on to calmer waters. Because when working people benefit from that growth, when every community enjoys the fruits of wealth creation, it stops a country turning in on itself and against the world. And that, in turn, helps provide a stable foundation, breathing space, for a country to take advantage of those opportunities for a better future.
4 teenage IDF soldiers have been killed and more than 60 wounded in a drone strike on an army base in northern Israel. It's the deadliest attack on an Israeli base since Israel stepped up attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon last month. Lebanese terror group Hezbollah have claimed responsibility for the attack. This comes as the UN peacekeeping mission says Israeli tanks have forcibly entered its base in southern Lebanon. The health ministry there says 51 people were killed by Israeli strikes across the country yesterday. The perfume bottle carrying the Russian nerve agent that fatally poisoned a British woman contained enough poison to kill thousands of people, the inquiry into her death has been told. 44-year-old mother of 3 Dawn Sturgis was pronounced dead at Salisbury District Hospital in July of 2018. The Novichok poisonings inquiry is to look at whether she died after she was caught in the crossfire of an illegal and outrageous international assassination attempt. She collapsed at her partner's home on the 30th of June of 2018 after coming into contact with a perfume bottle containing Novichok. It followed the attempted murder of former spy Sergei Skripal, his daughter Yulia and then police officer Nick Bailey, who were poisoned in Salisbury in March that year. The trial of 3 members of the same family over the murder of 10-year-old Sarah Sharif has begun. The child's father, Irfan Sharif, stepmother Bainash Batul and uncle Faisal Malik are accused of killing her. Sarah's body was discovered at her home in Surrey on the 10th of August last year. The defendants have pleaded not guilty to her murder and to causing or allowing the death of a child. A potential third assassination attempt on former US President Donald Trump was reportedly thwarted on Saturday night. Local police arrested an armed man carrying multiple weapons and fake passports as he attempted to get into a Trump rally in California. The 49-year-old Las Vegas resident, Vem Miller, denied wanting to hurt the former president after being released on bail. This comes as the local county sheriff said the man in question was likely to be a sovereign citizen, someone who does not believe in government control. And the snowman is being depicted on a new Royal Mint 50p coin, with a gold version hidden in one of its advent calendars for someone to discover on Christmas Eve. The Mint said that to further celebrate the launch of the Snowman 2024 collectible 50p coin, it's hidden a solid gold coin behind door number 24 in one limited edition advent calendar, offering someone the chance of striking gold. The advent calendars will be priced at £30, with a total of 3,000 available. Only one will have a gold-proof coin of the snowman hidden inside. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 7 minutes past 1. Now, it's a great time to back Britain.
Woo.
Those are the words of the Prime Minister as he made the case for investment into the UK at his first International Investment Summit.
Yes, Sir Keir Starmer pledged to get rid of regulation that needlessly holds back investment as part of his big plan for economic growth.
It comes as the Tech Secretary, Peter Kyle, says he's absolutely ready to engage with Elon Musk, despite his notable absence from today's summit.
OK, well, GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster joins me now. Catherine, we've been talking quite a lot on the show today about this vibe shift in the way Starmer's talking about Britain, in the way the Prime Minister's talking about this country and its economy, etc., etc. Cast our minds back to the Rose Garden speech where we all told things were going to get worse before they eventually get better. Now, Britain has never been in a better place for people to invest. What's changed?
Yes, it's quite a different tone, isn't it now? I think what's changed is, on the one hand, I think there is a recognition that they probably did overdo the doom and gloom a bit. They came in, they say that they found that things were much worse than they could have imagined. We know there's going to be difficult choices coming in the budget on October the 30th. So I think they wanted to be honest and prepare people for that. But, of course, you've got to give people a bit of hope and a bit of optimism. And I think what's different here is with this International Investment Summit today, he's talking to the world, really. He's talking to these global business leaders, trying to drum up business for Britain, trying to drum up investment, because the government desperately needs growth. They've said it's their number one mission. And they need private investment to get that. Now, they've had a succession of announcements coming today. We expect that there could be up to £50 billion worth of investment announced today. So it is a really big deal. But the Prime Minister trying to sell Britain, saying, look, we have a stable government now, saying that, the chaos has gone away, say that determined to repair Britain's brand as a stable, trusted and rules abiding partner. So trying to draw a contrast with Conservative chaos, I guess. Elon Musk is not there, noticeable by his absence now. Peter Kyle, the Science and Technology Secretary, has said that it's not really his sort of cup of tea, that he's very happy to talk to him about investing in Britain. Of course, Elon Musk was with Rishi Sunak at the summit last year in Bletchley Park, but I think worth mentioning that, of course, was a specific AI summit. This is much, much broader. But also, I think very noticeable that the Prime Minister is talking about regulation and saying specifically about getting rid of red tape that needlessly holds back investment. We know that for various reasons, things like major infrastructure projects, HS2 being just one of them, are notoriously difficult, housing, etc. So Labour are saying they're going to rip up some of these rules to make growth, make building easier.
To be fair to Elon Musk, who's just landed the largest rocket ever built in human history. I mean, it's remarkable to talk about landing rockets. Normally these things fly up, but Elon Musk has managed to get the booster to fly down. But perhaps he wouldn't be interested in doing this in the UK. After all, there was a rural cafe that had to close last year because of noise complaints due to clinking teacups.
Oh, I remember that.
And I just think if this country allows cafes to shut down because a clinking teacup is too loud, 30 roaring Rapture engines that takes a skyscraper to space, perhaps would be rejected by a local council.
Well, we know there's not a lot of love from Elon Musk to the current government, don't we? Because he's been very active on X, which of course he owns. And during the time of the riots, he was very, very outspoken about the handling of that, about prisoners being released, about people being policed for comments that they may have made on social media. So he's not a great fan of the current government. He is a great fan of Donald Trump. So they're clearly not a match made in heaven. But Peter Kyle saying that he will be very, very happy to talk to Elon Musk in the future. But clearly that's not going to be happening today.
OK, well, Catherine Forster, thank you very much, our political correspondent there in Westminster for us. I remember that clinking of the teacup story. That enraged you.
Everything about Britain, isn't it? It's like you try and do a little bit.
Maybe it was really, really annoying.
Clinking teacups.
OK, it can't be
You
that
try and do a
annoying.
little bit of economic growth. You try and set up a business here. I mean, we've all likely seen the trouble that Jeremy Clarkson had trying to put down a farm track on his farm. The council says, no, you can't put down a farm track on land that you... I mean, just whenever you try and do anything in this country, a petty bureaucrat will come and say, no, you have to stop. You can't do this, you can't do that.
Official with his clipboard come round and tell you, oh, no, 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 you can't possibly do that.
And that's the
Or you have to pay X amount if you want to do anything. But there you go. Do you know what I want to know? It's all well and good having these big investment summits for the, massive companies, the Googles of this world, the Amazons of this world. What about the backbone of the British economy, the small businessman? What are the government going to do for them? Because all I can see is all this workers' rights legislation going through, which is going to make it harder for some small business owners. The big companies, they'll be able to soak it up more easily. The little man, with his, shop or whatever with 3 or 4 staff or, I'm thinking of small businesses, the dry cleaner, the car wash, whatever it is. Much more tricky.
Yeah, we've heard this promise on business rates for some time, but I don't think we've, as of yet, got much detail. But there are clearly big questions of economic growth in this country, and actually, frankly, in this corner of the world. It's pretty notable that of the new AI systems that are being rolled out, Europe isn't getting any of them, because they passed this big EU AI Act that means that all of these tech companies are steering clear of the over-regulated markets in Europe. I mean, ironically, this is perhaps one of the biggest Brexit benefits that we've had. Nick Clegg, yes, Nick Clegg, who now works for Mark Zuckerberg, of course used to lead the Lib Dems, has been saying that we're going to roll out this new software in America, in Canada, Australia, the UK, but not in the EU because of the regulatory uncertainty in the EU. I suppose that shows a little glint, a little hope of light at the end of the tunnel. Could this be a way that we actually open up new industry in this country?
A little Brexit dividend, was that one?
Could it be?
Little Brexit win, perhaps? I'm just reading here that the Google chief, the ex-Google chief that was on, he's saying the UK needs to expand its high-skilled immigration. Oh, contentious, eh?
Well, let's now speak to the Labour MP for Macclesfield, Josh Simon. Sorry, I can't read today. Josh, I know your name's Josh. Thanks so much for joining us.
And Tom, I've got to say, you did that last time. It's Makerfield, not Macclesfield.
Honestly,
he's losing his mind today. I'm sorry.
I was about to say it's a Monday morning. It's really not. It's the afternoon. Anyway, Makerfield and Josh Simons, thank you so much for joining us. You, of course, are a big figure in the Labour Growth Group. What is today's summit going to do for growth?
Well, the important thing about the Labour Growth Group is that it's an answer to exactly the problem that you and Emily were just discussing. The last government, however much it wanted to do things that would generate growth, was pulled backwards and forwards, up and down by, angry, sometimes rabid backbenchers. And that investors lost confidence in investing in Britain because they didn't actually think in the end that the government were in charge of governing the country. And we are the answer to that problem. We are Labour's answer to the ERG, because what we're saying is we will always stand behind the difficult things that this country needs to do to generate growth, and that includes some of the bold things that you've been hearing about today.
Were you disappointed, Josh Simons? You're talking about growth there very strongly, very important, of course. Everyone wants economic growth. Well, most people do anyway. Who aren't ideologically opposed to it, I guess. But Josh Simons, have you been a bit disappointed with how things have gone so far with the new Labour government? A lot of negativity, wasn't there, in the build-up to this summit? We all remember that speech in the Rose Garden where we were told everything was pretty much doom and gloom, everything's going to get worse, or the budget's going to be really hard for everyone and all of this. And now today, it's like, oh, wait, Britain is the best place in the world to invest. Everyone come here and pour your money into this country. I mean, has anything actually changed between the Rose Garden and now, or is this just a comms change?
Well, I think both of those things can be true. You know, it is both true that the budget is going to be difficult. You know, this country's in a difficult fiscal position, and any government would not be responsible and prudent if it were not honest about that fact. But it is also true that we are an incredible country. We have amazing resources and we have so much to offer international investors and a great platform on which to build some of the sectors and industries that will be future sources of growth. So I think, you know, although those two things have happened over time, because I think the Prime Minister was keen to make sure that he levelled with the country right from the start, both of those things are absolutely true at the same time.
But Josh Simons, why are so many millionaires upping sticks and leaving? I mean, we're hearing this day after day, this exodus of potentially wealth creators.
Well, on a day when the Prime Minister has announced £50 billion worth of investment into this country, I'm not all that worried about money going out of the country versus coming into the country. And, you know, to be specific about some of what's being announced today, £10 billion of investment. Blackstone, the American investor, is going to invest £10 billion in Blythe. That's going to be for a data centre that's one of the biggest in Europe. That really matters for jobs. That's 4,000 jobs in Blythe. But it also matters for generating those engines of growth over the coming decades. And that is the sort of money that is pouring into this country right now, today.
No, it's a really important thing to mention. I mean, data centres being nationally significant infrastructure projects. This is a change that this government has brought in and is clearly a positive one. We've seen some of these nationally significant decisions meant to cut through the bureaucracy of local planning to approve solar farms and data centres. That's all great. But there's been new research released today by the Britain Remade campaign group, I'm sure you'll have seen it, that shows actually 40% of these government decisions on nationally significant infrastructure projects have been delayed under this government. That's slightly up on the last government. The last government delayed 38% of them. The new government is delaying 40% of them. So yes, you can point to individual things that have been approved, and props to Ed Miliband for approving so much. But when it comes to transport and Louise Hay, I mean, there's delay and delay and delay.
Well, Tom, I think a 2% increase in nationally significant projects that have been authorised 3 months into a government is not a particularly significant statistic. But look, you know, let me just step back and say it is absolutely vital that the government gets big, nationally significant infrastructure projects off the ground. And that is what we, as the Labour Growth Group, expect to see over the coming months and years. You know, I don't want to
Under the last government, 38%.
I mean, you know full well, Tom, that
this government, 40% are delayed.
A 2% increase over a time horizon of 3 months is not a meaningful statistic, Tom. I also haven't seen this research. I've been busy talking to international investors, so I can't comment too much on it. But look, if over the course of the whole Parliament, we authorise fewer nationally significant infrastructure projects than the last Conservative government, then I'm very happy to come back on here and have that conversation, because that will be a problem. And the Labour Growth Group is really clear that we expect to see investment, we expect to see major projects, and frankly, we do not expect to see local councils blocking the kinds of infrastructure projects that this country so badly needs.
Josh Simons, people really want to know whether national insurance is going to go up on employer contributions. It seems like the government are toing and froing on this one. We can't get a clear answer. Is that acceptable, really, when we're waiting this long for a budget?
Well, I think the principle that the government's been really clear about, both during the campaign that I fought the election on since, is that taxes must not go up on working people who have already been squeezed for years and years and years. And that is what you will see them stick to at this budget. You know, I unfortunately have no unique insight whatsoever into what's going on inside the Treasury at the moment. So you're not going to get anything out of me that you tried to get out over government ministers.
Josh Simons, who do you think should bear the brunt of the tax rises? You know, we're hearing we need to have 25 billion worth of tax increases. Who should bear the brunt?
I think the most important thing is that we want to make sure that there is money circulating in our economy. And that means, in turn, that the big bulk of working people in this country who've been squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, and their spending power has been reduced and reduced and reduced, we do not want to be raising taxes on those people. Now, that means that we have to invest in the fundamentals of the country that unlock their capacity to be productive and to produce growth. That means things like infrastructure. It also means some of the healthcare planning that we've been talking about, you know, making sure that we are focusing on prevention rather than just dealing with things after the fact. All of those ways of thinking about how do we have a productive, well-endowed middle class who actually can spend money in our economy.
Though, is it?
That must be the priority.
Is it going to be businesses that bear the brunt? Is it going to be the rich? Is it going to be wealth taxes? Is it going to be national insurance contributions for employers? I mean, we're getting nothing, are we? We have no real idea of where these taxes are going to go up.
Well, you'll see the budget in not that many weeks, and I think what you'll see at the budget is a balanced budget. You know, it's not this idea that what this Labour Party does is pit one group against another group. We're just not going to do that. You know, I'm not going to sit here and say taxes should go up for the rich and the rich should pay for everything that we need to do in the budget. You know, a sensible, prudent chancellor
to be honest,
in this
Bridget
government
Phillipson did exactly that with private school students versus state school students. I mean, it's there in black and white on her Twitter. Some of Labour cabinet ministers do like pitting people against one another.
Well, I don't think that's a fair description of what Bridget Phillipson has done. You know, it's a very specific, targeted policy. That it's not pitting the rich against working people. It's saying that actually the small percentage of private schools, including one that I went to, and in fact Tom, I believe, should pay VAT on those private school fees in order to fund state schools right across the country. You know, that's a very targeted. It's not pitting groups against each other. It's a very targeted way of saying we need to back our public education system in this country. That is an investment in the vast majority of children who go to it, and that's a perfectly principled, targeted thing to do.
OK.
I think I should claim my scholarship at this point. But no. Josh Simons, thank you so much for joining us here. And you're, of course, the Labour MP for Makerfield, which I'll never, ever mispronounce again. And indeed, I should visit. Josh Simons, thank you so much for joining us.
Would you like to make an apology to the people of Makerfield?
Makerfield. It's a really good name for a constituency because it makes things. Yeah. Makerfield.
Yeah, it is.
Good.
Who gave you a scholarship, eh? Madness.
To be fair, it's for drama.
Drama? Seriously? Who would have thought it, eh? A little young thespian.
Yeah, don't make me quote Shakespeare. I will. Right, much more coming up on today's programme. Ethnic minority pupils are doing better than those who don't come from ethnic minorities. That's according to new research. We'll discuss that after the break.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Right, up and down the country, many parents are preparing or have indeed already sent their child off to university.
Indeed, but sometimes it can leave parents struggling to cope with the, quote, empty nest syndrome their child leaves behind. So joining us now to discuss how to cope with sending off your sprogs to university, or not so sprogs, is broadcaster and psychotherapist Lucy Beresford. Good morning, Lucy. Nice to see you this early. This is a real thing, isn't it? It's our colleague Paul Coitz, our sports expert, describes it as grief, sending your young adults off to uni and leaving the nest for the first time.
Yes, I think grief is the right word because it's an ending. And it's not just an ending with your relationship with your child. It changes from here on in. But it also is very much about your identity. Your identity as a parent is weakening. You'll always be that child's parent, but you're not going to have the same involvement on a daily basis. And so you're left to think, okay, well, what does my life look like going forward? What's my relationship? If you're in a relationship with a partner, how is that going to change? And like all elements of grief, there's going to be a bit of a process. There's going to be that transition period where you adjust to your new life, just as your sprogs, as you call them, are adjusting to their new, exciting phase of their life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
OK, good afternoon, Britain. It's now 1:27. Now, it turns out that Chinese heritage pupils on free school meals are now outperforming white British pupils from far better off backgrounds. That's according to a report on diversity today.
Well, Policy Exchange research found that such pupils averaged a GCSE grade of 7.3, which means absolutely nothing to me. I switched
9
away
is
from
the max.
OK, so that's...
So it's pretty good.
Is that like a B? Is that...
No, that's like a B, yeah.
Yeah. Right. Sorry, we're talking old money. Whilst the average for white British pupils on free school meals was 6.4.
OK, well, broadcaster Sir Trevor Phillips, who wrote a foreword for the report, said it showed the traditional belief that life chances are determined by a simple black and white binary has been completely overturned.
Well, delighted to be joined now by the executive head of St Thomas the Apostle, Serge Kefié. Serge, thank you so much for joining us.
Sorry, Serge, how do you pronounce your surname? We're terribly sorry.
It's Safai.
Safai.
Yeah.
You know what?
Well,
it should have been spelled. Don't worry.
He's having a bit of trouble this morning, isn't he, or this afternoon?
Oh, no. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This is a fascinating report because it shows that even people from who don't have much in terms of, money, if they come from a different sort of, background of rigour, they can actually achieve far more.
Well, I've read this report, and I have to say I agree with Sir Trevor Phillips in terms of, it shows that social mobility is possible in our country, and our schools are doing a pretty good job, I think, with that. However, as to why our white working class are doing so poorly in comparison, that brings up a whole load more questions that I don't really understand. I think you already alluded to it. I can only explain it by higher academic expectations in the home. And I think we need to deal with it, and people need to accept it. And because we've been talking about the white working class children doing, well, I suppose I'll have to say badly in comparison to other pupils for about 10, 12 years now.
I don't know, Serge, do you think it might have something to do with, apart from how people are brought up in their own home, and if you have parents who aren't talking about education, who don't care about your reading ability, who don't care about how well you do in your exams, then obviously it's going to be harder to, get that impetus to do well from yourself alone. But could it also have to do with the fact that schools do promote diversity? There may be special schemes for ethnic minority children. There are in terms of sometimes at university as well, and programmes to help kids from different backgrounds do better. There's nothing just for white pupils. Now, I'm not saying there should be, but could it have something to do with that?
I'm not sure it has. I mean, a good school with a good head teacher, as long as they're wearing your uniform, once they've got that badge on, you do the best you can for every single one of them. But the home, you can't underestimate how important engagement is from the home, and expectation levels are from the home. And when you've got the home working together with the school, you know, you build up that trust. And once you've got the trust between home and school, you can really do well. In my schools, I've always taught in so-called disadvantaged areas. Both of my schools now in the top 15 for Progress 8. Tom, I know you won't know what that means, but you should talk about Progress 8, you know, more in terms of judging how schools move children on. But there is a problem with our white working class, and it needs to be solved. And the sooner the better. We have some truth, trust, put back into our schools. Let's start telling the children and the parents the truth about where their kids are earlier on, so that intervention can take place earlier on. I've never subscribed to an excuse culture, ever. Good teachers won't. No patronising. Let's tell it how it is, and let's stop this erosion of expectation and aspirations that we do seem to have in certain areas of our kids.
It is fascinating to see children of Asian backgrounds, actually, wherever you look in the world, doing very well. I mean, in the United States of America, Japanese Americans were put in internment camps in the 1940s and are now the highest earning sort of ethnic breakdown of all the groups. I mean, is there just something deeper going on here? It turns out to be that people from these backgrounds, wherever they're plonked in the world, just do very well.
Well, I'm back to where I was. You know, academic expectations in the home. That's what they've all got in common. No excuses, you know, proper parenting, if I can use that term without you getting lots and lots of text. You know, no excuses. Get off those tablets, start working, because eventually we want you to have a good job and earn as much money as you can so that you can contribute positively to the society that you live in. There's too many excuses. Things are too easy for our kids at times. And we've always got someone else to blame. These labels, for instance, I can't tell you. You know, I'd like to bring in new labels. They're old ones, really. You know what? We do have naughty children. We do have lazy children, believe it or not. Of course, you can't use those terms. You have to have an ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, you name it. Well, luckily, I can say what I want now. I've been teaching 45 years. Not in my schools. Not in my schools. They come in, they get told if they're rubbish at maths. And we tell the parents they're rubbish at maths. But we don't just leave it there. Well, now we know they're rubbish at maths. We're going to do something about it. And if they work hard, you will cooperate with the home, guess what? You get great results. And I think that engagement from the home is important. And maybe that's what's been lost by some of these lower achieving ethnic groups.
A bit of tough love is needed. Serge Survey, thank you very much. Sorry, we'll have to end it there. Executive Head of St Thomas the Apostle, thank you very much indeed. I think it does need to be a bit tough love. I remember when I was told, oh, you'll never make it to secondary school, Emily. You're far too lazy, not working hard enough. Oh, you're going to get a D in your chemistry. Didn't A-star. Anyway.
Very, very
Just
good.
wanted to get that out there.
No, absolutely. Very important. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Plenty more on today's programme. We're going to hear from our national reporter, Charlie Peters, on the public inquiry into the death of a woman in the Salisbury poisonings. It's all opened this morning and some interesting revelations have been revealed.
Tom, thank you very much. The top stories this hour. The Prime Minister says he'll do everything in his power to galvanise economic growth. Speaking at the International Investment Summit today, Sir Keir Starmer said the government will make sure every regulator in the country takes growth as seriously as businesses. The government's unveiled investment deals worth billions of pounds in AI, life sciences and infrastructure. It comes following a row over criticism of P&O ferries that reportedly jeopardised a £1 billion investment by its owner DP World. Now that as 4 US tech firms have announced plans to invest £6.3 billion in data centre infrastructure in the UK, a move the Technology Secretary calls a vote of confidence in the country. That announcement coming during today's summit. 4 teenage IDF soldiers have been killed and more than 60 wounded in a drone strike on an army base in northern Israel. It's the deadliest attack on an Israeli base since Israel stepped up attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon last month. Lebanese terror group Hezbollah have claimed responsibility for the attack. This comes as the UN peacekeeping mission says Israeli tanks have forcibly entered its base in southern Lebanon. The health ministry there says 51 people were killed by Israeli strikes across the country yesterday. The perfume bottle carrying the Russian nerve agent that fatally poisoned a British woman contained enough poison to kill thousands of people, the inquiry into her death's been told. 44-year-old mother of three, Dawn Sturgis, was pronounced dead at Salisbury District Hospital in July 2018. The Novichok poisonings inquiries to look at whether she died after she was caught in the crossfire of an illegal and outrageous international assassination attempt. She collapsed at her partner's home on the 30th of June in 2018 after coming into contact with a perfume bottle containing the substance. It followed the attempted murder of former spy Sergei Skripal, his daughter Yulia, and then police officer Nick Bailey, who were poisoned in Salisbury in March that year. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. After a chilly weekend, it is getting warmer over the next few days. Still feels pretty cool with the dank conditions across much of the south today. It was quite a wet start across southern England thanks to this little weather system. That is now scooting away. There's another weather front across northern Scotland, providing some cloud and rain across the Northern Isles and Aberdeenshire, but that is also tending to clear. And much of southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern England, dry, fine and sunny. Not a lot of sunshine further south, the rain clearing, but staying a bit damp and drizzly here and there, and certainly staying fairly grey. Temperatures struggling up into the teens, maybe the high teens across the south later on, but further north, feeling quite pleasant with the sunshine and the lighter winds. There is still some of that rain just clearing away from Shetland and Orkney into this evening, however, but it will be turning drier here. Generally elsewhere across Scotland, it's going to be a fine evening with largely clear skies, and same goes for Northern Ireland and a good chunk of northern England. But head further south and it's staying fairly cloudy. There is some rain and drizzle here and there, so a little bit damp for the evening rush hour across parts of the M4 and the M25. Now, as we go through this evening and overnight, we're not going to see a great deal of change. Clear skies will allow it to turn a little chilly across parts of Scotland, at least for a time. Temperatures could dip down to freezing. But further south, we're actually going to see the thicker cloud and the drizzle just drifting north, so there may be a few spots over southern Scotland, certainly northern England. Temperatures in the south staying in double figures, but as I said, it's a pretty chilly night across northern Scotland where we've got the clear skies. But it does mean here some sunshine on Tuesday. Elsewhere, Tuesday is going to be a pretty glum affair, a much duller day for central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern England. Parts may brighten up through the day, particularly North Wales, and staying largely sunny across the far north of Scotland, thanks to southerly winds that are, despite the cloudy conditions, wafting up warmer air.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, hello to you again. I'm Jules Buckley. Glasgow, the eastbound M8 slow going around the M77 interchange. That's junction 22. There was a collision there on the exit slip earlier. That's now cleared. Patchy queues back to Paisley now at junction 3. Now with the M606 meets the M62, that's junction 1 Chain Bar. On that roundabout, there's 2 lanes combed off. Emergency drain repairs underway, so slow going. Westbound M65 around Blackburn, junction 4 to 3. All the traffic on hold to sort a collision out. That's naturally causing queues. Heavy to the north of Bristol, eastbound M4 19 to 18. The outside lanes combed off, a bump there being recovered. And the southbound M11 near to Saffron Walden, junction 9. Slow for an earlier collision, but again, all lanes there back open. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
MPs have finally chosen their top 2 for the leadership. And now, it's over to the members. Join me, Christopher Hope, on Thursday as Kevin Badenoch and Robert Jenrick are quizzed by Conservative Party members and myself at our GB News leadership event.
And afterwards, join me, Patrick Christys, with a live studio audience and a star panel as we discuss what it means for the Conservative Party and what it means for you. Decision Time, the race to lead, from 7 p.m. this Thursday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, welcome back. It is now 1:40 and a public inquiry examining the death of a woman poisoned by Novichok in Salisbury in 2018 has opened this morning.
Many people would ask, why has it taken, 6 years? 6 years to
Yeah,
open
6
this
years
inquiry?
later.
Blimey. Dawn Sturgis died after she was exposed to the nerve agent, which had been left in a discarded perfume bottle in Amesbury in Wiltshire.
Yes, her death followed the attempted murders of Russian double agent Sergei Skripal and his daughter Yulia, who were all poisoned in March of that year.
Well, our reporter Charlie Peters has been following the inquiry and joins us now. Charlie, it was a huge deal when it happened, but why is the inquiry so much later on?
Well, to answer that first, the inquest was originally founded, the coroner's inquest, but they had to transfer it into an inquiry now, years later, because they need to be able to hear classified or secret information in this inquiry with closed hearings. That's not possible in a coroner's court in England and Wales, and so they need to make that transition to hear more evidence related to the many questions that they'll be asking here. I think the key point I've heard this morning from the start of this inquiry is that the poison that killed Dawn Sturgis, that nerve agent Novichok, could have killed thousands of people. Now, she died 4 months after the attempted murder of Sergei and Yulia Skripal, Sergei Skripal being a former double agent from Russia who then fled to the United Kingdom, having been exchanged in a prisoner swap. Now, the question, the leading question is, what are the events that led to Dawn Sturgis's death? Where is the blame potentially to be allocated for why that Novichok was still in circulation in public? How did her partner come across it in a perfume bottle near Salisbury, near where this attempted murder happened 4 months earlier? And the inquiry will also look at the broader factual circumstances surrounding the poisoning. And they'll also assess, I think quite interestingly, the medical treatment that Dawn Sturgis received after they realised that she had been poisoned in late June. She died some 9 days after first being taken to hospital. Now, there are some concerns about the adequacy of that treatment and if doctors had acted sufficiently quickly enough on information from the police. They initially theorised that she could have been suffering from a drug overdose, and they want to know whether that theory was dismissed as quickly as it should have been. There are also going to be discussions about the responsibility of the Skripal poisoning. We heard written submissions from Sergei Skripal today saying that he absolutely applies blame to Vladimir Putin. So that was a very direct moment. We also heard from the lead counsel of the inquiry saying that they've reached out to the 3 GRU, Russian military intelligence agents, involved in that alleged murder plot from 6 years ago. None of them have written back after 3 separate attempts, all going through the Russian embassy, and we're expecting more to continue this afternoon.
Charlie, thousands of people could have died. That is a fairly stark thing to have come out of this inquiry. How?
Well, the lead counsel said that those who moved that bottle, that perfume bottle, into some location did so with grotesque disregard for human life. And we saw some footage, some still images of what that perfume bottle looked like and the amount of nerve agent it potentially carried inside of it. Just one spray could act fatally. And so the amount of liquid that they found, the spread of it could have been potentially fatal to so many more. That's a similar conclusion that was reached at the time in 2018 when the original investigation into the attempted murder of the Skripals went on. In terms of what we were talking about earlier, Tom, I think another key point we need to get across about why this is happening as an inquiry, not an inquest. Other examples people should be aware of it. The Alex Litvinenko inquiry, the man killed by that tea poisoning in 2006. Also the Manchester Arena bombing of 2017. Both of those being conducted with secret information from intelligence sources. That's what we're going to require here as well.
One bottle of perfume capable of killing thousands.
It is
a strong agent there.
It's a stunning fact when you think about sort of all of those out there who would do us harm. I mean, I'm given to understand that this nerve agent can only be produced by states with, you know, very advanced research facilities. I mean, the Russias, Chinas, Irans of this world. But fairly soon, thanks to artificial intelligence, your common or garden lone wolf terrorist could be making this stuff.
And so it's worth noting that the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons only added this nerve agent to its prescribed list of weapons after this incident. So people weren't necessarily aware of Novichok as a damaging poison in circulation. Sergei Skripal, in his written evidence to the inquiry today, said that he read somewhere that Vladimir Putin is very interested in poison. So perhaps, Tom, as you suggest, there could be other avenues for scientists and those with deadly intent to explore other ways to get those sorts of poisons into circulation.
Right, OK. Well, Charlie Peters, thank you very much indeed, our national reporter. Now, we've got lots more coming up on today's show. The Prime Minister, he's still redecorating. He's taking down more portraits from the walls of Number 10. Who's been removed this time? Last time it was Maggie Thatcher. Who is it? Who is it next? You'll find out.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Catherine Richards and Jake Singleton-Hill featured on the reality show Love is Blind.
Well, Catherine and Jake are joining us now in the studio for Saturday Morning Live. Thank you very much for joining us. And this is perhaps not the end result that people might have thought that they'd be seeing at this point, because you were both on the show, but you didn't fall in love in the pods, did you?
No, we didn't. I rejected him.
You guys look great together.
Yeah.
Very happy as well. It seemed like you guys were really strong, and it almost seemed like Freddie, after he admitted to you that he'd cheated in the past.
I actually respected the fact that he told me up front. I didn't even want to have that conversation, obviously. That was a conversation that we got told to talk about. And I respected his decision, but I think he felt that I was holding this grudge towards him that she really doesn't like, and which was not, and he knew this, because off camera we had many conversations where I was like, thank you for owning up, like, we can just move on from this. But if anything, I think he just felt guilty the whole entire time, and he put that on me, which is fine, but yeah, there's obviously a lot that people don't see.
So for viewers who don't know, Love is Blind is where you go and seek love and romance, but you don't see who you're speaking to, right?
No.
So, Jake, why did you go on the show?
My parents actually met in a very similar way. So my stepdad was texting my mum. He'd basically stolen the number off of a friend because the friend had met my mum in Blackpool, and they were texting for like 6 months. They'd never met. So that premise of how they got together and the marriage that they had was stunning. And to build a relationship not based on looks before you met, I just found that just incredible.
So do you believe in that concept? Is it lust or love at first sight?
It's weird.
It's a bit of both.
I think, it's definitely a bit of both. And I always say, as you get older, your looks will change, but your personality will stay the same.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player app. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's coming up to 10 to 2. Now the Prime Minister has reportedly taken down portraits of Elizabeth I and Sir Walter Raleigh. These were both in display in Downing Street.
Yes, now this comes after the Prime Minister faced quite a bit of criticism when it emerged he had removed a painting of Margaret Thatcher as well. Now, in response, a Number 10 spokesperson has said a change of artwork had been planned before the election. Had it? It does seem like Sir Keir Starmer likes to take lots of these down. Shall we speak to the director of the New Culture Forum, Peter Whittle, about this? Peter, does this tell us something about the man in charge?
It tells us a lot about the man in terms of his character.
but also, more importantly, I think, the general political makeup of the government now. I mean, essentially, you've got these two portraits of two world-class figures of British history, and they were hanging in a room in which he generally receives foreign heads of state. I think most recently he had the Ukrainian leader, whose name suddenly escapes me, I'm afraid.
Zelensky.
That's right. There. The point is really, is that why take these down when you really should be promoting and being proud of Britain's history and Britain's heritage in front of other world leaders? I mean, in their place has gone two pictures by the artist Paul Arago, which are essentially basically about female empowerment, or there's kind of thematic pictures that mean very, very little to most people, certainly in this context. And he's taken down instead a picture of somebody who is the very model of female empowerment and importance, and that is Queen Elizabeth I. Obviously, this is about basically shame, if you like, of our history. These two people, Elizabeth and Sir Walter Raleigh, were two of the people whose name came up during the whole BLM thing of a few years ago. They are two of the characters who basically were linked with colonialism and therefore were seen as bad. And as a result, what is the defining image?
When he was asked about taking down Margaret Thatcher, he said, he told the BBC, I don't like images and pictures of people staring down on me. I've found it all my life. This isn't actually about Margaret Thatcher at all. Do you believe him?
Well, frankly, I mean, he's a man now with a negative approval rating. I think he's got to get used to people looking down on him. So there's nothing new about that. You know, this is crazy. This is a man with no sort of hinterland at all. He doesn't have a favourite poet, apparently. He doesn't have a favourite novel. This has all come from various interviews. He's essentially a technocrat par excellence, you know, and therefore they have no feel for our history. They have no feel for our heritage. But the point is, the most important point about this is that he is the Prime Minister. Emblematically and symbolically, he should be having, you know, I put a picture of Churchill up there as well, for goodness sake. Why not? This is actually, you know, we are showing ourselves off to the world.
Does this speak to a just fundamentally different sort of politician in number 10 than we've had, well, ever, really? I mean, I was reading something over the weekend that suggested that perhaps this government is the first sort of post-1960s style government. I mean, sort of people had cared about history and, you know, the Commonwealth and what was formerly the Empire and all of the things that this country did in the world. And perhaps for the first time we have a Prime Minister who really thinks of, well, doesn't care for overseas territories, doesn't care for Elizabeth I, sort of sees this as year zero.
You've really got a point there, Tom. I would say, though, that he's in some ways like son of Blair in that sense, because the first time we heard about year zero was actually under Blair, where Blair said things like, we're a new country. He showed great disregard for our institutions, whether it be monarchy or House of Lords or even the courts. Huge amount of vandalism, constitutional vandalism under Blair. In some ways, he is the successor to that. But, you know, he makes Blair look like, you know, St. George.
It does show a bit of a disrespect, or indifference at least, to our history. But Peter Whittle, we'll have to leave it there, sorry. Director of the New Culture Forum. This Good Afternoon Britain, lots more to come. Don't go anywhere, we've got plenty to bring you.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, heading into tonight and tomorrow, it's often going to be cloudy with some rain and drizzle. There will be some clearer and brighter spells in the north, though, and feeling rather mild in the south. Some showers and longer spells of rain across the far northwest of Scotland and in the southeast of the UK, but this clearing away now as that frontal system drifts towards Europe. It is leaving behind, though, plenty of clouds, still with some drips and drabs of rain and drizzle, mainly across hilly areas, and this cloud will move its way northwards across the country, bringing a fairly cloudy night to come. There there are plenty of clear spells in the far north of Scotland, and that's where it's going to be feeling cold under those clearer skies, but elsewhere still a fairly cool night on offer, but mild in the far south. So to start Tuesday then, there will be plenty of clearer spells in north of Scotland. Quite a cold start, perhaps some pockets of mist and fog and some frost in rural spots too. But otherwise it is going to be largely cloudy, still with those drips and drabs of rain and drizzle, once again just mainly over hilly areas, and a fairly cloudy and drab start across the rest of England and Wales. Now this leads us into a fairly dry day, but that cloud is going to be sticking around. Some brighter spells at times, once again the far north of Scotland, perhaps at times down across the southeast, but otherwise a fair amount of cloud around and quite breezy at times around coastal areas. But on the whole, largely dry, once again some rain and drizzle across the hills, but otherwise a fairly settled day on offer, and turning a little bit warmer across the country too, particularly in the south and southeast. We're looking at highs of around 17 to 18 Celsius. Into the evening, it will turn more and more unsettled. We'll see some showers, some longer spells of rain creeping up from the south. This will be heavy at times, and that leads us into an unsettled day on Wednesday. Drier and cooler on Thursday, but likely turning wet and windy towards the end of the week.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Monday, the 14th of October. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Britain is open for business. Yes, the Prime Minister is pledging to get rid of regulations that are holding back investment in Britain. But can we believe him?
And more historic reparations. A group of 15 Caribbean nations will ask the King and Sir Keir Starmer to pay £200 billion in slavery reparations. Now, the Foreign Secretary has spoken very much in support of such a move in the past. Will the government cave in this time?
Bring back British wood. Yes, the restoration of Lord Nelson's warship, HMS Victory, has sparked outrage due to its use of French oak. Critics are upset that the foreign timber is being used on a symbol of Britain's naval power.
Could we be getting a little bit closer, Tom, to actually paying these reparations? Caribbean countries have been calling for huge amounts in reparations, compensation for the slave trade and associated wrongs. 200 billion is the current figure, although there are some estimates, trillions could run into the trillions.
Yeah, this is all about compound interest, which I think is a very peculiar way of working these things out. There was an academic who found that there was a loan that wasn't paid back in sort of the 1100s from the Brits to the French. And if you do the compound interest calculations on that tiny amount of money and do it for 1,000 years, it ends up worth more than the global economy. So when you're talking in terms of hundreds of years and compound interest, you just get to pretend money.
Now, David Lammy, in 2018, huge speech in the House of Commons, demanding that Caribbeans get reparations for wrongdoing, past wrongdoing. Could it be that actually the government, you know, they've ceded sovereignty of the Chagos Islands? Could this be next? Could there be, you know, a push for reparations? Could they actually agree to it?
Well, I'm sure there'll be a push for reparations. After all, that's what the countries are calling for. I just can't see how you can set out a framework whereby you can actually say who gets reparations and who doesn't. I mean, do we ask the Danish for reparations? I mean, they pillaged. They sent Viking hordes down the Thames and sacked London. I mean, at what point do we say history stops and history begins?
Yeah, I guess the difference is that our Foreign Secretary now believes in reparations, or at least in theory. Anyway, gbnews.com/your say. Get in touch, but let's get the headlines with Tatiana.
Emily, thank you. The top stories. The Prime Minister says he will do everything in his power to galvanise economic growth. Speaking at the International Investment Summit today, Sir Keir Starmer said the government will make sure every regulator in the country takes growth as seriously as businesses. The government's unveiled investment deals worth billions of pounds in AI, life sciences and infrastructure. It comes following a row over criticism of P&O Ferries that reportedly jeopardised a £1 billion investment by its owner DP World. That as 4 US tech firms have announced plans to invest £6.3 billion in data centre infrastructure in the UK, a move the Technology Secretary calls a vote of confidence in the country, that announcement coming during today's summit.
In times like this, economic growth is vital, as it's always been, if we're to steer our way through a great period of insecurity and change and on to calmer waters. Because when working people benefit from that growth, when every community enjoys the fruits of wealth creation, it stops a country turning in on itself and against the world. And that, in turn, helps provide a stable foundation, breathing space, for a country to take advantage of those opportunities for a better future.
Right, some breaking news just into us. The UK has announced a fresh wave of sanctions against Iranian military figures after the country's missile attack on Israel, in which almost 200 ballistic missiles were fired towards Israel around 2 weeks ago. The UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy says following the attack on Israel, we are holding Iran to account and exposing those who facilitated these acts. Well, that as 4 teenage IDF soldiers have been killed and more than 60 wounded in a drone strike on an army base in northern Israel. It's the deadliest attack on an Israeli base since Israel stepped up attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon last month. Lebanese terror group Hezbollah have claimed responsibility for the attack. This comes as the UN peacekeeping mission says Israeli tanks have forcibly entered its base in southern Lebanon. The health ministry there says 51 people were killed by Israeli strikes across the country yesterday. A court has heard that the father of Sarah Sharif fled to Pakistan after allegedly killing the 10-year-old and called police to say, "I legally punished her and she died." Irfan Sharif made the confession in an 8-minute call about an hour after his family's flight had landed in Islamabad on the 10th of August last year before Sarah's body was found. He's on trial accused of her murder alongside Sarah's stepmother, Bainash Batul, and uncle Faisal Malik. Opening their trial, the prosecutor said all of the defendants had played a part in a campaign of abuse against Sarah, leading to her death. He told jurors that doctors found Sarah had dozens of injuries, burns and broken bones after her body was found in bed at her home in Woking in Surrey on the 10th of August last year. In other news, the perfume bottle carrying the Russian nerve agent that fatally poisoned a British woman contained enough poison to kill thousands of people. The inquiry into her death has been told today. 44-year-old mother of 3, Dawn Sturgis, was pronounced dead at Salisbury District Hospital in July 2018. The Novichok poisonings inquiries to look at whether she died after she was caught in the crossfire of an illegal and outrageous international assassination attempt. She collapsed at her partner's home in 2018 after coming into contact with the perfume bottle containing the substance. It followed the attempted murder of former spy Sergei Skripal, his daughter Yulia, who were both poisoned in Salisbury in March that year. And finally, the snowman, who's being depicted on a new Royal Mint 50p coin with a gold version hidden in one of its advent calendars for someone to discover on Christmas Eve. The Mint said that to further celebrate the launch of the snowman, it's hidden a solid gold coin behind door number 24 in one limited edition The Snowman Advent Calendar, offering someone the chance of striking gold. The Advent calendars will be priced at £30 with a total of 3,000 available, and only one will have a gold proof coin of the snowman hidden inside. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 7 minutes past 2. Now, the Prime Minister has set out his plans to rip up red tape in a bid to woo. Good word, we should use woo more. Global investors at his first International Investment Summit today.
Yes, Sir Keir Starmer, he pledged to get rid of regulation that needlessly holds back investment. This is part of his plan for economic growth.
Well, it comes as 4 US tech firms announced plans to invest £6.3 billion in the UK data centre industry, following the move by the Tech Secretary, which he's called a vote of confidence.
OK, so is it a vote of confidence in our economy? GB News political editor Christopher Hope joins us now. Christopher, it does strike me that the government want to project a more positive vision of this country after talking it down for so long.
Yes, hi Tom, hi Emily. Well, you blink, shut your eyes and listen to the message, and it is quite interesting how similar the language is to the last Tory government. Sir Keir Starmer telling an audience in a speech there, including Eric Schmidt from Google, he says that they want to force regulators to put growth at the forefront of what they're doing. We'll make sure that every regulator in this country, especially on the economics and competition regulators, take growth as seriously as this room does. Now, many would say that those regulators, like, for example, the Competition Markets Authority and other regulators in that space on competition, look after the interests of consumers, you and me, and stop us being exploited by companies. So, you know, shut your eyes, and that's kind of language which Liz Truss might have used. And you're hearing here from a Labour Prime Minister. Eric Schmidt himself was quite surprised to hear the PM talking about growth. And Eric Schmidt, the Google CEO, in a Q&A after that, said, why not have a minister for anti-regulation, which may go somewhere. So you're seeing a change in mood, change in strategy here, I think, from this government to go after the kind of capitalist money they need to get the growth going. The government's claiming as much as £60 billion worth of deals. You mentioned data centres. There's one also £1 billion in Stansted Airport. Some of these deals, as is being pointed out on Twitter and X and elsewhere, have been talked about before, but in many ways they're being almost rubber stamped by the government today. So they have been around for a bit, particularly the Stansted investment was, I think, announced in November last year, but the government's confirming it today.
As is so often the case with these projects, they get announced about 16 times by the government at various different points in their cycle. But Chris, this is obviously a significant moment for this government, and is it this sort of refresh, relaunch that Keir Starmer has been looking for after his pretty choppy first 100 days?
Yeah, Tom, I think the relaunch is in two parts, today and then the budget on October 30th. I sat down with Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, moments ago, and we're playing out that interview at 5 o'clock. We do discuss elements of the budget in that interview, which viewers might find quite interesting. But for me, if you take a step back from what's going on, and it's the 101st day of this government today, in a sense, we're still in a trailers phase, the kind of adverts of other films, other things, what the government might try and do. The actual movie, I think, starts on October the 30th or October the 31st. That is the moment when this government sets out its tax and spend plans for 5 years, basically. I think that's the moment when the government starts work. They've waited and waited and waited to give the OBR, the independent body, a chance to check the budget, check it won't spook the markets. But for me, the government's real work starts on October 31st. I mentioned that upstairs to a senior cabinet minister, and they nodded, saying that's where they are going to be. They're trying to almost relaunch this government after that budget.
And Christopher, just while we've got you, there's been a lot of talk about reparations to Caribbean nations. Now I hear that Number 10 have had to slap down the suggestion that up to £200 billion could be sent to Caribbean countries for slavery compensation, essentially. But David Lammy's been very pro this idea in the past, now Foreign Secretary. Might there be a bit of a rift?
Well, there could be. The timing is interesting. It comes ahead of CHOGM, the Commonwealth has a government meeting next week out in Samoa, so in the middle of the Pacific. A group of Commonwealth nations are looking to try and get some money back from the UK in terms of reparations. Some individuals have already started doing that. Laura Trevelyan, for example, the former BBC correspondent, has done that with some of her family money. The number is huge. It's 206 billion up to 19 trillion pounds is forecast to be owed. David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, said in 2018 on social media, and also said it in the House of Commons, we don't just want an apology, we want reparations and compensation. It's very clear from Number 10 today that's not going to happen. They're saying that's not on the agenda. A spokesman for the government says, just to be clear, reparations are not on the agenda at the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. Technically, the government's position is this, hasn't changed. We do not pay reparations. I also asked that question of the Chancellor earlier, and her answer is quite interesting at 5 o'clock.
Oh, well, stay tuned for that. Thank you very much indeed, Christopher Hope, our political editor there at the Investment Summit.
Yeah, and a lovely background as well. I'm glad that the government is hosting events in sort of nicer areas. It's very often these are in sort of bland conference centres and it's all concrete, but this is majestic.
Majestic. Anyway, we're now joined by the chairman of Gales Bakery, Luke Johnson, in the studio with us to reflect on this investment summit and I suppose the government's approach to business. You're the chairman of a very successful bakery, what's the word for it?
Chain?
Chain, there we go, across the country now. How do you think it's going?
Well, I think I have a degree of cynicism because no one in the Cabinet, as far as I can tell, has any experience or understanding of business. They essentially all come from the public sector or the political world. So I do wonder how far their understanding of business extends. And certainly to date, I think a lot of their focus has been on things like pay rises for public sector unions, which isn't exactly going to help the private sector. There was this phrase that the Prime Minister used earlier, talking about ripping out bureaucracy. Sounds good, but the reality is last week they introduced a big new piece of legislation with significant additional employment regulations, which I think an awful lot of employers would see as a burden rather than something to help employment or growth or attract investment. And also, I'm afraid to say, this government are completely obsessed with net zero, which, as we know, means that energy costs in this country are higher than in any comparable country. Mm. And anything like manufacturing, for example, requires cheap energy. Mm. Energy in this country is something like 5 times more expensive than it is in America. We cannot compete with that. Yeah. And the mad drive towards net zero by 2030, which is ahead of any other country, is only going to make us more and more disadvantaged in terms of attracting investment and developing our industry. So they come out with these phrases and there's all this talk at this event, but the reality of what they are proposing and all their actions is the reverse, that they are anti the private sector, anti-business, don't understand it, and the idea that this would promote growth is a delusion.
Would you go as far as to say that to some extent this government might be making the same mistake as the previous government? The previous government spoke endlessly about reducing migration and they increased it. This government speaking endlessly about cutting red tape. But from your experience, they're increasing it.
Yeah, they are, I'm afraid to say, and they've only been around for 100 days. The truth is that, for example, when it comes to employment legislation, the organisations that really suffer are smaller businesses, but smaller businesses actually create most of the new jobs. They're disproportionately responsible for innovation. They are the heartland of this country, but they can't necessarily afford highly paid lawyers and big HR departments, which is what you increasingly need if you are to manage the swathe of regulation that surrounds employment these days. And, you know, as I said earlier, I think this government, you know, appear to be all show and you know, form, not substance.
I mean, if the Chancellor and the Business Secretary were here, they'd say, we've sat down with small businesses, the Small Business Federation, we've sat down with the various groups in business and we've decided on what is a fair package of workers' rights. They say, you know, it's been watered down somewhat, hasn't it? I mean, the union demands are far more far-reaching than what we've currently had set out. What is it exactly that's worrying you? Is it the, you know, the right to sue for unfair dismissal from day one, or is it the default on flexible working, or is it more just the sound of it, the sort of direction of travel?
It's all of it. Ultimately, countries are successful in economic terms, I think not so much because of government laws, but because of culture. It's the atmosphere. Either they promote entrepreneurship and the idea that people should try to start businesses and get rich, or they are essentially much more interested in public spending and bigger government and more laws. And I worry that this government are very much the latter. They are primarily interested in the public sector. They don't understand the private sector. They think business is there really to be tolerated. And all this talk
and taxed.
And taxed. And all this talk of more prosperity and growth is just that talk.
Can I ask one final question about the budget at the end of this month? We've heard a lot from entrepreneurs about their concerns over capital gains tax. I mean, taxes that, to be honest, most people in the country don't pay, but those that create jobs do pay. Are you fearful about the budget at the end of this month?
Almost every successful entrepreneur I've spoken to in recent period is extremely anxious about what may be revealed in the budget because they take risks with their capital to try and grow businesses here. And I think, to a fair degree, this has been a good place to develop companies. But I think that if risk takers and entrepreneurs are punished by much more onerous taxation, then they will not invest, they will not work as hard, and some will leave.
Has Gales Bakery held off on making certain decisions?
No, we have not, because I think we're taking the optimistic view that you know, come what may, we will continue to do OK. But for a lot of businesses out there, I know they are standing on the sidelines and waiting to see before they commit because they are nervous.
Well, there we go. Luke Johnson, thank you very much indeed. You're the chairman of Gales Bakery. Very interesting.
Absolutely fascinating. And I think we're going to hear more of these stories in the run-up to that big budget day. But plenty more coming up on today's programme. Indeed, that contentious issue of slavery reparations and the Caribbean. That's up next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
True crime is everywhere.
Yeah, next weekend, CrimeCon UK takes place in London. And joining us now to tell us more about that event and the true crime phenomena is former detective Stephen. How do you pronounce your surname? Keogh. Sorry, Stephen.
That's all right,
I should have texted you before.
No worries.
And Nancy, and again, Nancy, what's your surname?
Bourne.
Thank you. I'm showing my ignorance there, but thank you for both for joining us. So, Stephen, you're a former top cop. Hope you don't mind me describing you as that. At CrimeCon and other events like that, do you get into sort of the semantics of the investigations and, you know, how... for example, how I was watching something the other night where somebody was unfortunately murdered, but you saw the crime scene investigators trying to work out from which side the person was attacked from. Did the knife come from the left-hand side or the right-hand side? Is it all that kind of stuff?
So for me, everything I've done since I've left the police is about sharing that knowledge of investigations, because if you watch TV, they get it wrong a lot. So what we try and do, I'm not the only police officer there, there's experts, of forensic scientists, psychologists, all from that investigative world. Just trying to get across, well, actually, this is how it's really done. This is what we do, not what you're going to see on telly. And I think that's really important. So for me personally, coming along to CrimeCon, I just look at the list of people that are there, honestly, and I'm proud to be associated with them. There are some fascinating people there. People who've really fought for justice for their children. People who are campaigning for victims, for survivors. So it's an event that. When you look at the name, you might think, oh, they're just going to sit there talking about serial killers and what they got up to. Couldn't be further from the truth. It's really about what goes on, how it impacts the victims, how the investigations are carried out. It's educational as much as anything.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Conservative MPs have finally chosen their top 2 for the leadership. And now, it's over to the members. Join me, Christopher Hope, on Thursday as Kevin Badenoch and Robert Jenrick are quizzed by Conservative Party members and myself at our GB News leadership event.
And afterwards, join me, Patrick Christys, with a live studio audience and a star panel as we discuss what it means for the Conservative Party and what it means for you. Decision Time, the race to lead, from 7 p.m. this Thursday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Conservative MPs have finally chosen their top 2 for the leadership. And now, it's over to the members. Join me, Christopher Hope, on Thursday as Kevin Badenoch and Robert Jenrick are quizzed by Conservative Party members and myself at our GB News leadership event.
And afterwards, join me, Patrick Christys, with a live studio audience and a star panel as we discuss what it means for the Conservative Party and what it means for you. Decision Time, the race to lead, from 7 p.m. this Thursday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, well, good afternoon, Britain. It's now 2:24. Now, Sir Hilary Beckles, he's the chairman of the CARICOM Reparations Commission. Well, he's urged the UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy to lead efforts in securing reparations from Britain for the transatlantic slave trade.
Well, if Mr Beckles says it, I don't see how he could possibly refuse. Beckles proposed a summit to develop a reparatory justice model, emphasising Lammy's advocacy for such reparations in the past.
Yes, the issue potentially amounting to £19 trillion.
Can we just set, because these numbers always sound ridiculous.
Trillion.
The entire UK economy is what, 2.7 trillion?
Let's just give it all away.
Trillion?
Just give it all away.
How many times more than like all of the money in the country do these Caribbean countries want?
So you just cripple, bankrupt, actually, people of Caribbean heritage who are living here.
Sorry, if we pay £19 trillion, 19 minus 2.7, where are we at? 15, 16, 17... we're going to be minus 16 trillion?
We'll be very poor indeed.
I mean, how do you have a negative GDP? It's impossible. Anyway, obviously, we're deeply impartial on this channel, so we're going to hear both sides of the
It's going to be expected to be a key topic at the upcoming Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. So here's what Lammy had to say on the matter a couple of years ago.
People who have worked, paid their taxes, paid their national insurance, and then denied NHS treatment if you now have cancer, denied your pension that you have contributed to, told that you are not now able to seek public funds, that you are not able to work in this country. I'm afraid, as Caribbean people, we are not going to forget our history. We don't just want to hear an apology, we want reparation.
We don't want an apology, we want reparations.
OK, well, joining us now to discuss this is historian and broadcaster Rafe Hadel-Manku. Now, Rafe, we must say that the Number 10 spokesperson has, just in the last hour or so, slapped down this, saying that the policy hasn't changed, no reparations. But our Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, appears to be very open to this idea.
Yeah, it's always great to hear from David Mastermind Lammy. The idea that this is the man who's now representing Britain on the world stage, I mean, you would have hoped that elevation to the international platform would have made him a bit more measured in his tone. I hope that we will see some more measure, given the statement from Number 10, compared to what he has said in the past. Because let's be clear here, Britain does not owe a single penny to anybody in the Caribbean nations. This is nothing more than, you know, some sort of avaricious cash grab by, you know, by left-wing activists in the Caribbean, but also bad faith political actors who are trying to really capitalize and exploit, you know, our current, you know, sort of nihilistic wave of self-flagellation that we're enduring in this country. There are two key points here. Firstly, we've more than paid our debt. The British government paid £20 million in 1833 to free the slaves. That's a sum equivalent to £20 billion today. It was 40% of its budget in 1833. And yes, that money did have to be paid. It's all about realpolitik. If the law to get slavery abolished was going to pass, it meant that you did have to do a deal with the slave owners. That's just a sad reality of the situation in the 19th century when, of course, you had rotten boroughs and so forth. Additionally, the British government spent 2% of GDP, a sum equivalent to our entire current defence budget, on the West Africa Squadron, the Royal Navy fleet that went to enforce an abolition of the slave trade on the Atlantic, not just for British ships, but actually seizing foreign ships and trying to stop Africans, because Africans are actually one of the most vocal opponents of an end to the slave trade. And so the cost of actually ending slavery probably negated any of the profits that were achieved through slavery, because slavery actually didn't contribute that much to the British economy. The second point to make is that there are no victims of slavery alive today, victims of British Empire slavery, I should say. And this is key because reparations are fundamentally an issue of tort law. That's T-O-R-T, tort law. And the purposes of reparations is to put the victim back into the position they were in before the harm occurred. So if you were talking about this in the 19th century and there were people alive, I would absolutely support reparations. But we're talking about 200 years ago. That's 6 or 7 generations. And no one can tell me that the great-great-great-great-grandchildren of slaves in the Caribbean have a worse life than if their ancestors had never left West Africa, which is where they came from.
Rafe, clearly what people are suggesting here with these numbers, I mean, £19 trillion, that's more than the entire GDP of China. But perhaps, if the British never arrived in the Caribbean and these people were left to set up their own country, perhaps it would have a bigger economy than China today. Perhaps they would be the most powerful and most wealthy nation in the world, and the only thing that stopped them, the only thing that kept them less rich than they might have been, was the dastardly British.
Well, it's nice, but unfortunately, you know, Wakanda wasn't built in Liberia, wasn't built in Ethiopia. The sad reality is there's no evidence to suggest that there would be any of the development that we've seen in Africa, or indeed anywhere amongst, you know, some of those colonies later on elsewhere in the Pacific and so forth, were it not for colonialism. The first thing to say, of course, is that the slave trade ended before actually the European nations began developing their colonies in Africa. So that's the first point to make. The second thing is, of course, Liberia and Ethiopia I mentioned because they were never colonized. So those are two states in Africa that never experienced colonization. Liberia was actually set up by slaves. But let's compare, for example, Benin in West Africa to the Caribbean, right? So the annual GDP per capita in Benin is $1,400 a year. It's $17,000 in Barbados. Life expectancy in Benin is 10 to 15 years shorter than it is in the Caribbean. So by every measure, it's impossible for me to see in what way the lives of people today have been impoverished by slavery if you are living in the Caribbean. You know, most of the Caribbean nations are middle-income countries who rank higher on the Human Development Index than Brazil or Mexico. And one of the reasons they're middle-income countries is because of their British colonial inheritance. The English language and the common law have made them able to become global players in the world economy. They've got all of the infrastructure of parliament and the judiciary and the civil service and universities and the police structure, all of the things that Britain left behind. I'm not saying that Britain had no evil side to its role in the Caribbean. Horrendous atrocities were committed. But today, in the 21st century, it's very hard to see how that legacy is anything but a positive.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed. Rafe Heidelman-Koo, historian and broadcaster. Always great to speak to you.
Yeah.
It could happen.
No, but it's a fascinating comparison, isn't it? Shall we compare, I don't know, Jamaica to a country that the British never colonised, Haiti? I mean, which is richer? Which is richer?
There's a huge push for this. A lot of people working behind the scenes on this type of thing, where it comes from academics to activists to politicians to government officials,
but it's all
to leaders
entirely
of these various
fictitious.
countries,
I mean,
all pushing for this
trillion.
idea of Western reparations, particularly the British.
I mean, so some islands in the Caribbean are going to get more money if this were to be approved, and of course the government doesn't want to approve it, more money than the entire Chinese economy. I mean, the UK GDP, I can't emphasise this enough, is less than £3 trillion. That's the entire UK economy. And they want reparations from us worth 19 trillion.
How many people of Caribbean heritage are living in the UK? It would be their taxes too that would have to pay for this extraordinary sum. I mean, it's just crazy. Just crazy. Anyway, let us know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. Can you see a time where we do actually end up spending billions, if not trillions, on reparations? I mean, stranger things have happened. Anyway, lots more coming up in today's show, including French wood has been used on the
HMS Victory.
There we go. Why? Why?
Tom, Emily, thank you very much. The top stories. The Prime Minister says he will do everything in his power to galvanise economic growth. Speaking at the International Investment Summit today, Sir Keir Starmer said the government will make sure every regulator in the country takes growth as seriously as businesses. The government's unveiled investment deals worth billions of pounds in AI, life sciences and infrastructure. It comes following a row over criticism of P&O ferries that reportedly jeopardised a £1 billion investment by its owner, DP World. That comes as 4 US tech firms have today announced plans to invest £6.3 billion in data centre infrastructure in the UK, a move the Technology Secretary calls a vote of confidence in the country. The UK has announced a fresh wave of sanctions against Iranian military figures after the country's missile attack on Israel, in which almost 200 ballistic missiles were fired towards Israel around 2 weeks ago. That as 4 teenage IDF soldiers have been killed and more than 60 wounded in a drone strike on an army base in northern Israel. It's the deadliest attack on an Israeli base since Israel stepped up attacks on Hezbollah in Lebanon last month. Lebanese terror group Hezbollah have claimed responsibility for the attack. This comes as the UN peacekeeping mission says Israeli tanks have been forcibly entered its base in southern Lebanon. The health ministry there says 51 people were killed by Israeli strikes across the country yesterday. And a court has heard that the father of Sarah Sharif fled to Pakistan after allegedly killing the 10-year-old and called police to say, "I legally punished her and she died." Irfan Sharif made the confession in an 8-minute call about an hour after his family's flight had landed in Islamabad on the 10th of August last year, before Sarah's body was found. He's on trial accused of her murder alongside Sarah's stepmother, Bainash Batul, and uncle Faisal Malik. Opening their trial today, the prosecutor said all the defendants played a part in a campaign of abuse against Sarah leading to her death. He told jurors that doctors found Sarah had dozens of injuries, burns and broken bones after her body was found in bed at her home in Surrey on the 10th of August last year. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More news in half an hour.
Hello, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. After a chilly weekend, it is getting warmer over the next few days. Still feels pretty cool with the dank conditions across much of the south today. It was quite a wet start across southern England thanks to this little weather system. That is now scooting away. There's another weather front across northern Scotland, providing some cloud and rain across the Northern Isles and Aberdeenshire, but that is also tending to clear. And much of southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern England, dry, fine and sunny. Not a lot of sunshine further south. The rain clearing, but staying a bit damp and drizzly here and there, and certainly staying fairly grey. Temperatures struggling up into the teens, maybe the high teens across the south later on, but further north, feeling quite pleasant with the sunshine and the lighter winds. There is still some of that rain just clearing away from Shetland and Orkney into this evening, however, but it will be turning drier here. Generally elsewhere across Scotland, it's going to be a fine evening with largely clear skies, and same goes for Northern Ireland and a good chunk of northern England. But head further south and it's staying fairly cloudy. There is some rain and drizzle here and there, so a little bit damp for the evening rush hour across parts of the M4 and the M25. Now, as we go through this evening and overnight, we're not going to see a great deal of change. Clear skies will allow it to turn a little chilly across parts of Scotland, at least for a time. Temperatures could dip down to freezing. But further south, we're actually going to see the thicker cloud and the drizzle just drifting north, so there may be a few spots over southern Scotland, certainly northern England. Temperatures in the south staying in double figures, but as I said, it's a pretty chilly night across northern Scotland where we've got the clear skies. But it does mean here some sunshine on Tuesday. Elsewhere, Tuesday is going to be a pretty glum affair, a much duller day for central and southern Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern England. Parts may brighten up through the day, particularly North Wales, and staying largely sunny across the far north of Scotland, thanks to southerly winds that are, despite the cloudy conditions, wafting up warmer air.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, hello to you, I'm Jules Buckley, South Yorkshire, the southbound A1M just before the Doncaster turn-off at junction 36. The vehicle currently undergoing a tyre change, so slow going, a lane closure in place. Still issues on the westbound M65 in Blackburn. Junction 4 to 3 remains closed off, delays there at the scene of an accident. A fallen tree on the northbound M1 just away from Flitwick at 12, up towards Bedford at 13, a 3-lane stretch, slow going. Lane 1 is coned off there. And in Euston and London, the Euston Road, the eastbound side of the A501, now that's currently closed between Great Portland Street Station through towards the Euston Underpass, Big Quays back along towards York Gate, and buses diverting down Regent Street for flooding there and a burst water main.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Right, it's 2:38. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain, but there's plenty more coming up this afternoon on the channel, including Martin Dobney, who's up at 3 o'clock. Martin, what have you got in store for us today, then?
Well, we've got a monster Monday of sensational exclusives. Exclusive one, Rachel Reeves, make sure you're sitting down, because we asked her, does the Labour Party have any plans for slavery reparations? You will not want to miss that. Exclusive 2, a shocking new report shows 250,000 immigrants had no basic criminal record checks when they came into the UK. I'll reveal the full list of occupations where they are dangerously close to vulnerable people with no criminal record checks. Exclusive 3, the Lion of London Bridge, they called him, Roy Larner, the Millwall fan who stepped in and confronted ISIS terrorists, stabbed 8 times at the London Bridge terror attack in 2017. He was rewarded saving 30 lives, called a hero. Now they're making a movie about his life. I'll be joined with him. Is it time to pay Sir Keir Starmer 300 grand a year? Well, I'll be joined by John Caldwell, the phones for you billionaire who thinks he should have his pay doubled, really. Some people think they should get some pay back from the PM. And finally, there's been a dangerous rise in animal sacrifices, it appears. Is that being driven by cultural phenomenons? I'll be joined by Dame Andrea Jenkins later on the show. Action-packed, 3 till 6.
Yes, I did see that pretty shocking Twitter post of the insides of an animal just lying there. Let's get to the bottom of that one. Thanks, Martin.
Yeah, curiouser and curiouser. Up at 3 is Martin Dobney, of course.
He is indeed. But the restoration of HMS Victory, now Lord Nelson's iconic warship, of course, has sparked quite a bit of controversy today due to, guess what? The use of French oak.
Yes, the ship that sank the French fleet. Well, it's sort of becoming French. Critics are upset that the timber from France is being used on such a symbol of British naval supremacy.
Yes, the project manager, Simon Williams, to his credit, did acknowledge the irony. But he stated that French forests are better managed and provide the high-quality wood necessary for the restoration. So even our woods aren't good enough now. Our forests.
Despite the backlash, project leaders argue that using French oak is a practical solution to preserve the ship's historic integrity.
OK, well, joining us now is historian Dr Luke Blacksell. Is this where we are now? We have to use French oak for HMS Victory?
Well, it's rather ironic, isn't it, and rather amusing. A symbol of Britain's naval domination and the defeat of Napoleon's France and the securing of Britain's 19th century power base, and especially its maritime power, should be being restored with French wood. But perhaps there's a certain irony to this. This sort of new world of free trade and peaceful international relations, which indirectly the Battle of Trafalgar helped enable, is now enabling a British ship to be restored with French wood. And so having blown holes in her at Trafalgar, the French are now, I suppose, condemned to use portions of their own forest to repair her.
No, I do like the irony there, actually. If you were to spin this in a sort of pro HMS Victory way, I mean, Napoleon, of course, set up the continental system. He tried to ban any export, any trade between the continent of Europe and where were we? Great Britain, as we were then. Not England, not the UK, Great Britain, the bit in between. And of course, one of the genius things about the Royal Navy is we kept breaking the continental system. We kept trading with the Dutch. We kept trading with the Portuguese, despite Napoleon's insistence. So I suppose, to some extent, you could spin this in a positive light.
Yes, you could absolutely spin it in a positive light. I mean, there are several things that really occur in the 19th century as a result of Britain's maritime domination, which is cemented by Trafalgar. One is the ending of the slave trade throughout the British Empire, and the other, as you allude to, is the system of free trade, the direct opposite of Napoleon's system. And so in the sense, the system that was enabled by that victory is precisely the system that we see here now, alongside, of course, a world of peace that is being used to repair the ship. And so, while Nelson was a very patriotic man and was very concerned about the state of Britain's forests, I think he was also very much a pragmatist as well, and was primarily, I suppose, concerned with creating a really ruthless weapon of war in HMS Victory. So I think he would have appreciated the irony of this and would be smiling in his grave rather than turning in it.
Yes, I think we must put it to our politicians, I suppose, as to why France is so much better at managing their forests than us. Thank you very much indeed, Dr Luke Blacksell. You are a historian. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak to us. How do you feel about it? Have you spun it in a positive way sufficiently?
I can see it being spun in a positive way. I just love the history of HMS Victory. It was meant to be decommissioned by the time of the Battle of Trafalgar, but it was sort of renovated and brought back as a main ship of the line.
This is a £45 million project to fix the 3,500-ton ship. That's a lot of money, isn't it?
Do you know what? I've never been.
No.
And this story has really... I need to get down to Portsmouth and I need to see it.
We can go together maybe one day.
That would be... the other thing...
Do a show from there.
The other thing is the ship. I mean, 1,000 sailors called it home. I mean, trying to imagine 1,000 people, not just on the ship, but living there for months at an end, it's just astounding.
Yeah, well, GB News has reached out to the National Museum of the Royal Navy, who look after HMS Victory, and their Executive Director of Museum Operations, Andrew Baines, told us it is a huge undertaking which involves conserving and replacing many of her timbers, which have become weathered over the years. Now, the majority of the oak for this task is likely to be supplied by the French, where there is a centuries-old forestry system in place that can sustainably sustainably supply mature oaks for this kind of task. Some say Nelson might have been shocked, but the Royal Navy has a long history of using timbers from across Europe and the world in building ships, so we like to think that actually he would have approved of the best, most sustainable oak being used. I think this executive director has a sense of humour, doesn't he?
I like the idea of Horatio Nelson, sustainability czar. just really love, you know, all there about sustainability goals. That was his main driving force, wasn't it, Admiral Nelson? That and Lady Hamilton,
the leader of his time. Anyway, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Next, business leaders are warning that a Labour raid on employers' national insurance contributions will threaten jobs, damage investment in the UK. Are they going to go ahead with this one? They're not rolling it out. They're not rolling it out.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
So I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm going to see your show, Behind the Shoulder Pads, one night only at the Adelphi Theatre, October the 22nd. You're talking about your extraordinary life. Stage, screen, published author, 19
TV,
books, TV, most important.
Yeah.
Is there anyone who's managed to straddle, what, 7, 8 decades in showbiz and still be at the top?
Yes. I was thinking about that the other day because somebody said, you know, the last of good. There is a Shirley MacLaine.
Sure.
She started the same time as me.
Right.
Sophia Loren.
Yeah.
She started around the same time.
She's not working much, though.
It's true, she's not, but she's still out there being, you know, a major icon. And of course, people like Dick Van Dyke, who's just almost 100.
Yeah, he's incredible,
you know,
isn't he?
I'm a mere babe next to him.
You are. But and I was thinking about, you've written some extraordinary, wicked, waspish diaries, which of course you can because you've worked with so many people. Look at the names: Frank Sinatra, Lana Turner, Elizabeth Taylor, Dean Martin, Gregory Peck,
Richard Burton,
Paul Newman. The list goes on.
Gene Kelly,
and
my
Gene Kelly.
favourite.
Was he your favourite?
Yes.
Why?
Because I saw him in a movie when I was a little girl called For Me and My Gal with Judy Garland, and I just fell in love with him. It's such a cute movie. Well, they don't make movies like that anymore. And then I was lucky enough when I first went to Hollywood at age 20 to meet him and literally hang out with him and his friends. And then I put him in a movie with me that I produced. He played my husband in a movie called Sins. And he was wonderful. He was really wonderful.
The People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is now 11 minutes to 3 o'clock, and a Labour raid on employers' national insurance contributions will threaten jobs and damage investment into the UK. That's the warning of business leaders.
Yes, Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds, he insists Labour's manifesto commitment not to raise national insurance did not include employers' contribution, only referring to taxes on working people. But Tory leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick has called the proposed move a clear breach of their pre-election promises. All sounding rather duplicitous, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, no. We said we wouldn't raise national insurance, but we only meant half of it. We didn't mean the whole thing. I mean, can that stand?
And now Rachel Reeves saying, don't worry, the rich will bear the largest burden in the budget. What exactly does that mean? What exactly does that mean?
Well,
you know,
It all comes as Sir Keir Starmer refused to rule out the hike when challenged by Rishi Sunak in the House of Commons last week, of course.
Yeah, we're now joined by Chief Executive of UK Hospitality, Kate Nichols. Kate, thank you very much indeed. How much is this uncertainty over tax impacting your industry?
Well, I think what you're seeing is a protracted uncertainty, not just over tax, but also business regulations and broader business costs, as well as the whole economy. Our sector relies heavily on consumer confidence. If you've got uncertainty, that hits consumer confidence, business confidence, and investor confidence. And you're seeing people not coming out as much, not coming out as frequently, and you're seeing a holding off of investment plans until we get through the next few weeks and hear and see what Labour's plans are for the economy more broadly and the budget in particular.
It is, of course, a concern, because whenever we speak to Labour Party figures, they tend to say something like, national insurance, we promised to not raise it for employees. And they seem to be forgetting that if they raise the employer side of that, every single study that has come on employer-side payroll taxes, it comes out of wages. It is a tax on employees. Does that chime with your experience?
Yes, absolutely. I think, irrespective of whose bank account it comes out of, whether it's out of take-home pay for our workers on the employee side, or it's from the business tax account and the business account, it isn't cost-free. This is not a no-cost solution to raising money. Employers didn't see an NIC cut when employees did under the last Conservative government, so the burden of taxation falls disproportionately on businesses. And at a time when you've got Labour also talking about making work pay through increases in the national living wage and the employment bill that's coming through, there is an additional cost that's hitting employers across the sector, particularly sectors like mine that employ 3.2 million people. It's not an inconsiderable cost if you start to tweak upwards the NIC burden. And that does mean that you're having to make some very tough choices. If the cost of employing somebody comes up, it becomes more risky to make that employment decision, to take a chance on somebody, to increase jobs and growth, to take on more sites and expand in that way. So you are seeing a knock-on on longer-term investment propositions. Do you
think it's a bit disingenuous of Rachel Reeves and the government to say, don't worry, it's going to be those with the broadest shoulders that will carry the largest burden at this budget? At the same time, you've got the IFS saying that concentrating tax raids on small groups like the rich or whatever, or business, is a very risky strategy. The truth is, everyone's going to be forced to pay more, isn't it?
Well, I think that's right. And I think we're waiting to see what happens in the budget to find out actually what the details are. But this uncertainty, going back to Tom's earlier point, the endless speculation about what tax might come up is really hurting business confidence and consumer confidence, as well as getting that investment through. And it's meaning that we are struggling to see what will happen. You talk about the broadest burden, and I think there is a sense that business has the broadest shoulders. But let's not forget, in sectors like mine, 80 to 90% of them are small businesses who are making critical day-to-day decisions about increasing hours, increasing employment, number of hours that people are working, or taking somebody else on. And it matters between whether you increase employment by 1, 2, 3. These are people who are the furthest from the employment market. We desperately need to get them into work to help with productivity and to help with growth. And if you've got a pro-business, pro-growth agenda, you need to think very carefully about piling on costs and taxes to business before you will not see the returns coming through.
Absolutely.
So we would urge the government to work with us to prioritise where they want us to make that investment.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Kate Nichols, you're the Chief Executive of UK Hospitality. Thank you very much indeed.
It is a deep irony, isn't it, that a government that gets elected on the promise of stability has actually created a huge degree of uncertainty with where taxes are going to fall, and they've managed to have a chief of staff that lasted, 96 days?
And hiring at its lowest level since the pandemic.
Wow.
Good stuff. It's almost an assumption that whatever you do, businesses will just keep on hiring, keep on doing their thing. No, tax and regulation matters. Anyway, that's it.
To end the show on, we'll see you, of course, tomorrow at midday. Up next, it's Martin Daubney.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Well, heading into tonight and tomorrow, it's often going to be cloudy with some rain and drizzle. There will be some clearer and brighter spells in the north though, and feeling rather mild in the south. Some showers and longer spells